Welcome to the Ideagen Global Innovation 2030 Digital Summit. While we regret we are not able to meet face-to-face, one of the benefits of doing this conference virtually this year is that we are being joined by thought leaders from all over the world. And I want to thank you for being with us today. In a way, it's almost prophetic that we are meeting in a virtual setting, because it shines a spotlight on Ideagen's mission to bring leaders together to create a platform for cross-collaboration among the world's leading organizations. And in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, it magnifies the need to accelerate innovation and create solutions to many of the world's most difficult problems. The pandemic has forced us to accelerate the adoption of technologies that we've now come to rely on for many of our day-to-day activities, such as banking, shopping, groceries, doctor's visits, work, school, caregiving. As you know, the list goes on. Think back to how you operated before the pandemic. Suppose your company wanted to transition to having 90 to 100% of your workforce working remotely. That's easily an 18-month to 2-year project with countless meetings, planning sessions, proposals, and even then you may decide, this really can't be done. It may just be too risky. Yet, when the pandemic hit, many of us were forced to do just that. Not in 24 months, but in 24 hours. At ARP, we sent the entire staff home on a Friday and told them to take everything with them that they would need to work from home for several weeks. And though we had a few glitches that first week, things have been running very smoothly ever since. As a result, we've been able to continue to fulfill our mission, and we're at the forefront of helping older adults, who are one of the most at-risk populations to COVID-19 complications, to deal with the pandemic. We're able to do this because over 2 years ago, we actually did begin preparing for and implementing a work-from-anywhere strategy. Not because we saw something like this coming, but because we looked at what we thought the workforce of the future would become. And that's why we're here today, to imagine and prepare for the future. Think about how much of our world has changed in the last 10 years. And then think about how much it will change in the next 10 years. None of us really knows what the post-pandemic future is going to look like, but we know it will be different, and we do have some insights. This conference today gives us an opportunity to share those insights, and more importantly, to pause and reimagine the future and the role we all play in shaping it. So thank you, and enjoy the summit.
Welcome to the show today at Ideagen TV. Today we're excited as always to have guest host Anita Whitehead, KPMG, along with Todd Lohr from KPMG as well. Welcome, Anita and Todd. What a beautiful day.
Thank you, George, and we're thrilled to be back with Ideagen for the Global Innovation Summit. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. So this isn't the 2020 anyone expected. We thought we had a handle on the business, economic, and political trends impacting our companies, but instead we were thrown into the COVID-19 challenge. Every business and industry is experiencing a unique set of risks and impacts as they begin to reopen. And as we begin to think about reopening, organizations are crafting their own path forward. Coupled with this is an alphabet soup of recovery patterns which are influenced by many factors. With so much uncertainty, it can be really difficult to predict the right moves. So I'd like to start with Todd. In your role at KPMG, how are we approaching our own Restarting America initiative?
Great, thanks, Anita. So there's a couple ways that we're thinking about what we're calling, overall the Restart America work. And it's really two different elements, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on the framework that we're considering. One is obviously, as a large organization, a global employer, we have our own challenges and how we think about getting our workforce back into some of the physical locations. So we've started, early on, first in March, really thinking about what it looks like as far as first getting our folks safely to work and transition from their homes. And now as we start kind of entering the next chapter, how we're going to get them back into the workforce. I think what is also the dual side of this is we're spending a lot of time, not only from our own perspective on getting our employees back safely into the physical office space. We tend to stay away from the back to work because I think we'd all agree we've all been working, as much, if not more, in the last weeks and months. But really, how do we get our workforce back into closer proximity to our workspaces? But then also spending a lot of time thinking about this with our clients and how we're helping our clients think through this as well. And so it's been interesting because the two of those are really informing one another as we're talking to a number of clients in this space, understanding what their challenges are, what their opportunities are, how they're thinking about it with the experts that they've employed. And same on our side, we're actually being able to come up with a broader framework for what that looks like. And the framework itself is made up of 5 core areas that we're thinking about. The first is a risk framework. So how do you actually understand the risk associated to returning to the physical work environment? How do you manage that risk? And it's made up of everything from the community threat level. So where you are is very different, right? So I live in Chicago. That has a different dynamic as far as the risk of COVID-19 versus if I'm sitting in a more rural part of the country. So understanding that specific risk and also understanding individual risk. If I have underlying health conditions or other factors about me personally, I have very specific individual risks. So coming up with frameworks to help organizations think about those risks and ways to make the right informed policy decisions for how they return. The second is really, one of the things that is interesting is the HR workforce considerations. So how do you think about your workforce broadly? How are you going to, what job classifications need to come back and at what point do they need to come back? There's a lot of discussions there. There's a huge element of employee relations and change management as it relates to how you communicate that. This is obviously a very, trying time for everyone, including employees and our own employees at the firm. And so making sure that we're balancing all of those needs at that level. The third major pillar for us is really the partner ecosystem. How do you work within the government regulatory areas, your employees, your healthcare providers, medical insurance? There's a whole ecosystem of people that are playing here in a very complex, dynamic world that changes, not even daily, almost hourly. So how do you create an ecosystem view to be able to manage through the change that's we've already been through and that is still to come? The fourth, which is probably and I'll go into more detail around this, the technology side. My role in the firm is helping drive our technology solutions, both for KPMG as well as for our clients as well. So I'm spending quite a bit of time personally on what are the myriad of technology choices, decisions. How do we use technology as we start looking at the restart campaign? And the last and probably one of the more important aspects that we're seeing ourselves and clients embracing is this concept of having a integrated and holistic program management functionality so that you can actually pull all the pieces together. And I think we've done a really nice job helping our clients with this as well as ourselves on understanding all the moving pieces and making sure that we're coordinated, especially at the large global scale that we are as an organization.
Thanks, Todd. I'd be curious, are you seeing any differences across industries and other learnings that you've gathered?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that you're seeing specifically across industries is there are a lot of industries that have not necessarily left the physical work space, right? So whether it's utilities, whether it's certain government agencies, people within delivery, manufacturing, there's a whole host. And thankfully, as a consumer, I'm glad, I'm still able to get groceries and I'm still able to get my Amazon deliveries, et cetera. There's a whole host of folks that have never actually, been able to leave the work environment. So you're seeing that is probably the most initial dichotomy. There's industries that have been able to work from home, maybe not ideally, but have been able to figure it out. And they have I guess, a little bit different of a return strategy as it relates to how soon, what that looks like, how they actually communicate that. I would see the nice part about being able to help clients that have never really left kind of the physical locations, is we're able to get a lot of those lessons learned and apply to other clients that may be able to, start slowly reopening over the summer months or the months ahead, including ourselves. And so that's one of the nice areas we can kind of get those initial lessons learned from the folks that have had to respond quickly. We've helped a number of clients stand up applications within the first couple of days of how are you going to have people check in? What happens if someone gets sick? How do you do contact tracing in a manual way? And then we've been able to take those initial learnings and then really, as time progresses and we have more time, get more sophisticated in how we're thinking about it, how we're using, advanced data science, low-code applications, a whole host of other things to be able to scale it better. So some of the other things that we're seeing just as a general trend, and as the technologist here, I think it's interesting that I say this, but technology is going to be critical, but it's not, that might actually be some of the easiest parts of this. The technology is it's complex, but it's fairly straightforward. We know how to build technology as an organization. The policy perspective related to your employees and to the change management and the acceptance of your workforce and what it means in a very trying time, that's going to be some of the harder stuff, some of the softer skills that are going to be really critical. Thankfully, I think we've thought through a lot from a technology perspective on how we can help drive the adoption and the change and enable it with technology instead of not advancing it with the technology.
So talking of technology, could you just go into a bit more detail on just what you see as the role and what we're actually doing around that as well?
Yeah, so when you think about the why technology, I think there's three primary factors that I would consider why you need technology for this. And the first is probably scale. When I speak with a lot of clients, they have the policies, they've defined this is how it's going to work. I need to have people checking in. I need to, understand, who you're in contact with. There's a number of use cases in the current environment that most organizations have already defined. The challenge is, right now, not everyone's kind of back in a scaled environment, and so you're able to manually handle that with email, with some of the existing technical, capability that you have that's just, more basic functionality. The challenge is when you start thinking about scaling that in an organization with thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people outside of regions, countries globally, that becomes really untenable. You're not going to be able to have everyone email you every morning to let you know that they're okay in a very large organization. So scale is going to be absolutely critical in kind of the return to office scenario. Technology is going to be key to how we're going to scale. The second component to that is really around consistency of the risk framework and the policy frameworks, right? So as you think about every organization today is setting forth, this is offices are open, this is when we're opening offices, this is when we need to close offices, this is when we want people to work remotely, we want people to come in, when they can travel. There's a lot of new policy frameworks that every organization is defining. The challenge is the decisioning, the data, all of the things that are informing those policy decisions is changing hourly. And it's going to be really hard to inform all of those key decision makers in a decentralized model about all of those policies, about all of those decisions, without having some kind of consistently applied data visualization, communication, or even rules-based modules that help kind of adjudicate some of that for the policymakers. So I think consistency of policy application is going to be critical using technology. And the last component, and certainly not the least, probably the most important, as I said earlier, around the change associated to this, is the experience. We've spent a lot of time thinking about, I need to be able to communicate with our employees on a day-to-day basis. Okay, well, how am I going to do that? I need technology. Okay, that's great, but if they're not going to use the technology, that's not going to do me any good. So how do I create a technology experience that is really, centered on the design of the employee, around their experience, and really coming at a place of overall wellness versus just, a checking in app. A lot of things that we're seeing in the market is just, click this box if you're okay, but it's really how do you actually get to some of the emotional well-being, to the sentiment of the workforce, their overall wellness, giving them access to other value add things within the application is something that what we think is going to be critical to make this not about just checking in, but really driving towards a broader employee experience. So that's something that we're building into our thinking.
Very cool. So I guess as we close, what should companies be thinking about as they really start to reopen?
I think some of the things that I would think about, and I guess I'll gear this answer maybe more a little bit toward the technology. I think I referenced some of the broader policy frameworks, and I think you want to make sure that you're thinking about those 5 areas that I started the conversation with. But from a technology perspective, it's a pretty vast set of technology that you need. Everything from a mobile experience, so an application that you would work with your employees, directly interfacing with. That obviously is going to require, something that you'll need to build for them to have that day-to-day interaction with, whether it's checking in or reporting status or understanding that offices are opened or closed and communicating to provide that wellness experience. So that's one of the key areas that we're focused in on, is building out that mobile application experience. The second, kind of component of that is really that dashboard, that management system, so to speak, that shows the status of your workforce, the status of your office, your physical locations, your policies, being able to push those policies in real time, all of that data integration that I discussed earlier. So having capabilities around that are going to be critical. And then to advance the scale concept, using workflow, low-code case management type applications to be able to drive those policies end to end, and be able to manage some of the complexities of the process. In addition to that, I think a lot of organizations are also starting to think about how are they going to integrate contact tracing, what's available in the market, what does remote health monitoring look like, what are some of the options there, how do I think about IoT or Internet of Things to be able to integrate all of these things, whether it's sensors in your physical locations or on devices, being able to really drive that. So there's a lot of really advanced technology considerations for where we're going. I think what's most critical today is think about what is your overarching policy framework as an organization, and where you can use technology to meet the needs today versus the needs in the future.
Thank you, Todd. I mean, such great insights, and I know this will be helpful for everyone. And George, thank you for the time today, and for all the good work Ideagen is doing to bring all of our companies together.
Thank you.
Welcome to Ideagen TV. We are ecstatic today to have Mohammed Yunus, Editor-in-Chief at Gallup, with us today. Mohammed, welcome.
Thank you, George, and hello, Ideagen community. It's always an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be part of this year's summit. When George reached out and asked me to kind of share what Gallup was up to, I had a lot to share, so I'm going to do what I usually don't do, which is share slides. And I'm going to take you through sort of what we at Gallup have been tracking as the COVID-19 crisis has impacted the world. I'm going to start off, really the most of my presentation will be what we found in the US. That's where we've been most frequently polling. But we've also already began polling across 10 different countries, mostly across Europe. As we rely on phone interviews in those countries. And I actually have a wonderful webinar coming up on our plan for how we get back to face-to-face polling in the age of COVID around the world. But today, I really wanted to take you through what we've been learning. Before we look at numbers, I kind of wanted to tell you why we care. A lot of people know Gallup for our political polling, but really since our founding in 1935 and Dr. George Gallup himself, our passion has been to try to understand how people are living their lives in a way that's reliable, measurable, neutral, and objective, but at the same time in a way that helps leaders make better decisions about those they lead. So whether it's across society, as we'll be experiencing today and seeing today, but also within workplaces, within organizations, what we're focused on doing is using not only survey research, but really all research methods available to us to understand what's happening and how people are actually living their lives at the local level. Here, I just wanted to kind of share in the context we bring to this is really tracking major crises here unfolding in the United States since the Great Depression through all of these important moments in the United States. Since 2005, we've also been polling globally in 140 countries, covering 96% of the world's population, and I will be talking a little bit about that as we go on. Just to share some of sort of the top lines that we've gathered, and these first few slides will be data from our Gallup panel, which is an online survey that we do here in the United States that is nationally representative, but is a different tool than what we usually use to do, for example, presidential approval, which is usually through our RDD, or random digit dial method. So what we really wanted to track is a series of things, basically as many dimensions as we could about the crisis itself and how people are reacting. Here, you see the social distancing really plateauing in April, whether it's asking people if they're avoiding public spaces, avoiding small gatherings, or avoiding travel there at the top. There's really a peak in mid-April, and it's began to wane down. And one of the things we'll continue to track is looking at states that have really begun to open up, business as usual to some degree, versus others that are still under direct isolation orders from their governors or their representatives. When we ask about specific activities, we've obviously found a recent uptick in people saying that basically they're leaving the house to go to someone else's house or to visit a restaurant. Here in May, in the past couple of weeks, we are basically asking 1,000 respondents every day what they have been doing on a whole variety of these behaviors. And all of the data I'm sharing here, of course, you can find it on news.gallup.com in more depth. But here's a quote by my colleague, Dr. Jeff Jones, that more Americans are venturing out in public, but most are still isolating. And I'll highlight a little bit more of the detail in that later. When we ask about using face masks, we see now essentially that by mid-May, Americans have sort of plateaued in their responding and saying that they're wearing a face mask in the past 7 days when they leave the house. So like social distancing, I think this is going to be another interesting metric to follow when we see it kind of plateau and start to wane off differently within different localities, but also across different subgroups within the population. One of the interesting things about a lot of these metrics, particularly concern about contracting the virus itself, have been the partisan divisions that have arisen. Here, we ask Americans whether they think it's better to stay home as much as possible to avoid contracting or spreading the virus for those that are healthy, or whether it's wiser to sort of lead their normal lives as much as possible and avoid interruptions to work and business. And what you see is, at least through May 17th, 71% of Americans still say that they think it's wiser to stay home as much as possible. This is one of the items where we've seen a really interesting partisan divide, where Republicans are noticeably actually about twice as likely to say that they are essentially ready to go back to doing what they do normally. And Democrats are twice as likely to say the opposite. However, as of at least late May, at least half, just over half of Republicans still say that response there at the top, that to stay home as much as possible is wiser currently. Obviously, this will change and we'll continue to track it. But when you think about the implications for a response to this, the economic implications, of course, for businesses, for people getting back to normal, per our estimates, before all of this happened, you know, about 50 million American households were basically living paycheck to paycheck. So as the interruptions to business really crank into Americans' financial experience, the pressure to open obviously is increasing in a lot of places. I mentioned that we do a lot of work on workplace as well as the human experience and human behavior in society at large. Here, we've been asking Americans whether or not they've worked from home in the past several days. And not surprisingly, obviously, we saw a huge increase in the rate of those saying they are actually, in fact, working from home as the stay-at-home orders were unfolding across many of the states. What's interesting, and I think what's important to contemplate for platforms like Ideagen, and this is probably one of the least surprising data points, but I think one of the most interesting that I wanted to share, and here's why. When we ask those that are working from home if they want to remain working from home after the crisis sort of fades into the distance, about half of them actually say they want to continue to work from home if their employer would allow them. And I know that this is a community and a platform here at Ideagen where we're not only part of our community, not only really important technology companies, but really important global employers that are managing this right now. One of the things that we've been doing at Gallup through our one of our leaders, Larry Emond, out of Irvine, is doing a roundtable with CHROs, people who are on the front lines of the largest employers in the world, dealing with how do I navigate the fact that half of the folks at home now want to stay home? What does that mean for me as a business? What does that mean for our managers in terms of employee engagement? What does that mean for our office space in terms of how we organize ourselves? What does that mean for supply chains if you're in the manufacturing industry? So that's the first point, is really how much this is going to impact the workplace is one of the areas where we are most interested and have been doing the most research and will continue. The other point I want to make, and I think is relevant to the Ideagen community in this platform, is really the flattening of technology vis-a-vis opportunity. When you think about immigration, for example, a lot of the SDGs and a lot of what is behind the efforts around the Sustainable Development Goals are really to create better realities in developing economies for people to not need to leave their home economy for a more mature, more developed economy for opportunity. When you think about the flattening, if you will, geographically of the fact that we're all now connecting virtually, and sure, things are hopefully going to go back to normal in many regards, but the opportunity now for organizations to tap talent across the world simply through having somebody that has a laptop an iPad and a pretty solid internet connection, which is something to not take for granted in most societies, I think is going to be really important, not only for employers, but also for economies. When you think about remittances, immigration, and folks leaving home and sending money back from places of greater employment opportunities. So the first point is really, how does it change the workplace and managing teams? And the second point I think is relevant is, how does it change the opportunity game, particularly for those in less developed economies seeking higher income jobs? A lot of the focus, obviously, around COVID has been around healthcare. One of the things that we've done a little bit more in depth than some of the other topics is really focused on how Americans are perceiving their access to hospitals and services. I'll actually get into healthcare in more depth in a minute, but this is just a question we ask where we say, how worried are you about the following in your local area? And what we're showing here are those who say that they're very worried or moderately worried about the availability of coronavirus tests and the availability of hospitals to have supplies and services that they need locally. So we saw, obviously, in the beginning of April, a pretty high concern, 6 in 10 Americans. That has waned quite a bit, and this varies from location to location. One of the things about local hospitals and services is when we ask about various actors within the COVID crisis, from nationally elected officials to your local hospital, medical workers of all kinds, the media, local hospitals actually get the highest ratings. That and employers, surprisingly, I think for some, get the highest ratings in terms of Americans saying that they're attacking the crisis effectively. Those that get the lowest ratings go to the media. And also nationally elected officials tend to do a lot worse than local officials, like the state health officials or governors, for example, versus folks leading in the White House or Congress. This is a question that we're tracking to really get at the pain point between people's concern about the virus and the financial hardship that they're experiencing and pushing them to get back to normal. And it's very simply just asked whether you're very or somewhat worried or not worried at all, et cetera, about getting the virus, and also about experiencing financial hardship. We asked these as two separate questions. I know that the connection of these two questions has been a really important political issue. We're determined to ask them separately and just compare what is the rate of Americans who are reaching that level of worry with each. Interestingly, in May was a point where we saw 53% of Americans say that essentially they're experiencing financial hardship. Their worry level on that has a little bit higher than those that say that they're worried about getting the virus. Essentially, that's within the margin of error and not statistically significant. So right now we're kind of at a stalemate. If you look back in April, you see a really big difference in a noticeably higher rate of those saying that they're concerned about the virus. We've asked Americans how money worries or how this has impacted them financially. We haven't seen a lot of change on these metrics. It's interesting that when you ask Americans about their own personal situation, and we've reported on these on our website for those of you that are interested and kind of go through the details. I won't read them off here, but there's much less impact on Americans' perceptions of their own financial situation and how it's been taken a detriment to the coronavirus situation than it is on the national situation in terms of economics. And I'll get into that in a second. One of the things, actually, I want to back up and get into that now. So you'll notice here that only 9% of Americans say that they basically, compared to this time last year, this was in April, are not able to pay their rent, mortgage, or other housing costs. There's only been a 9% bump year to year. But where we do see a huge decline is in Americans' assessment of the national economy. One thing that we've been measuring for decades now is called the Economic Confidence Index. It's essentially based on two questions, asking Americans how they assess the current economy and their perception of how it's going to unfold in the near future. And in April, we saw a 54-point drop. It's essentially a zero is kind of the neutral point, and you can go up to plus 100 and negative 100. We saw a 54-point drop in 1 month. And that is the largest drop that we've seen in our tracking since 1992. So that's Americans' assessment, essentially, of where the economy is heading. Interestingly, Republicans actually were more likely to drop in the ECI, in the Economic Confidence Index, than a lot of other subgroups and than the national average. So Republicans actually dropped 72 points. I think what's really interesting about this statistic in particular is that it's not only a relative low, but it's a relative low coming immediately after a 20-year high. So assessments of the national economy have really taken a huge collapsing dip. It's not only been a decline, but a very precipitous one in terms of Americans' assessment of the future. And assessments of the future are primarily what are driving those declines. And as when we get into life evaluation and well-being, you'll notice that as well. Quickly here, I just want to show you mental health and suffering is a huge topic, of course, in addition to physical health with this crisis. And we've been asking Americans how long they feel they can go before each of the following happens. Basically, your mental health suffers, you experience financial hardship, or your physical health suffers. And you'll see that here on the left, Americans are much more likely to say that they're already experiencing mental health suffering than saying that they're experiencing financial hardship or physical health suffering. And we see that on many of the metrics that we've been gathering. If you're interested in all the other topics we've been following, and I'll talk a little bit more about healthcare in detail, but we really have been trying to tackle this from many different angles. We have a lot of content on our website, our podcast. We've been doing many webinars on deeper dives into the different dimensions of the crisis and the data we're gathering. But because, again, healthcare is such a critical part and access to healthcare of the SDGs and what Data for Good and Ideagen is all about, I wanted to also share some of the data we've been gathering with our partners at West Health. West Health is a healthcare organization in Santa Barbara, California, which for me as a kid from LA is basically paradise. And I always envy our partners there for living and working in Santa Barbara. But they're very passionate about healthcare policy and how it impacts access to quality healthcare and the cost of healthcare. What we've been asking is a series of questions about the COVID-19 situation specifically and how it impacts people's perceptions of healthcare. What we're finding is that 22% of non-white respondents, and it makes them twice as likely as white respondents, basically say that if they'd have a family member that had a fever, a dry cough, or other symptoms, they would avoid seeking treatment due to concerns about the cost of care. So um, I think like many developed countries, Spain, Italy, others, the pre-existing healthcare crisis in the United States has really taken a toll on the ability of the country to respond to the crisis. But here we see through these data, people really responding, and those communities with lower educational attainment levels and age discrepancies in terms of them saying that they're essentially avoiding healthcare or would avoid healthcare because they're concerned about the cost of care. We also ask whether if you thought you might be infected, would you avoid seeking treatment due to concerns about the, cost of care. And this is the same statistic, but played out, it essentially means that 23 million Americans will avoid that for fear of cost. We also ask whether people have been denied care because hospitals are basically over capacity. Not surprising, in the Northeast have been the highest rate of Americans who say that. 11% of Americans in households making under $40,000 also say the same. 9% of young adults under the age of 30, and that makes them twice as likely to say that they're being denied care because hospitals or healthcare facilities are over capacity. We've also been asking how people are feeling, and we also always do across the world. Well-being and tackling it from multiple dimensions is really a core topic for us at Gallup. Most of you have probably heard of the World Happiness Report. A lot of the data in those reports come from the Gallup World Poll and how we measure life evaluation. We measure well-being in two ways. One is the one I just mentioned, life evaluation. This is about positive and negative affect, or basically various positive or negative emotional experiences throughout the day previous the survey or interview. So what you see here is the stark rise. It's a pretty significant rise for the United States on worry and stress experienced the previous day, but a slow decline as the crisis has sort of waned. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, we've seen non-whites. The numbers on these are more negative than white respondents. Same thing with all of the things you would assume about lower respondents of lower socioeconomic status than higher, whether it's education, income, et cetera, are experiencing more stress and worry than those in those higher categories of all the variables I mentioned. This is probably the most important metric that we've been gathering honestly, across the world, but also here in the United States. This is the other way we measure well-being, and it's based on something called the Hadley-Cantrell's Life Evaluation Scale. And on the right, you'll see basically the question that we ask is to imagine your life on a ladder where 0 represents the best possible life, and the bottom of the ladder essentially represents the worst life. We've asked people to assess their lives today and in the future. We've been asking this question essentially since 2005 all over the world. And it's been one of the most interesting to track. I've, in previous Ideagen gatherings, shared some of the findings from whether it's countries during the Arab uprisings or the war in Ukraine, the Brexit vote, the election of Donald Trump. Many of the sort of unpredictable political events that have been taking place globally, we've seen a decline in particularly this metric as those events have just begun to unfold. What you're looking at here is a lot of data. So I wanted to give you a chance to kind of just absorb what's here. This is the rate of Americans who evaluate their current and future life well enough to be considered thriving in the metric. So all we ask a respondent is to pick a number today and in 5 years. And then they fall into either the thriving rate, which is people that are doing the best, the struggling rate, people somewhere in the middle, and suffering rate, people who are assessing their lives the worst, and that's based on their numeric response. what you'll see across the left to the right of the graph are essentially a series of events in American history, recent American history, whether it's the Lehman Brothers economic crisis in 2008, the election of President Obama, the election of President Trump, and what the thriving rate in the country looked like as those events were unfolding. I think the most interesting and most critical probably to compare is the 2008 crisis, where we saw it dip to exactly where it is today in America during the COVID crisis. But again, like those economic assessments of the country at large, where you really see a massive decline is in Americans' assessment of their own experience, their own lives. And that rate of thriving is now back down at the lowest that we've gathered in terms of collecting this metric specifically in this way here in the United States. But you'll see that it's dropped from a 55 much faster than anything we saw back in 2008 and the 2009 crisis. And again, all this does, this slide, is highlight the fact that where we've really seen the change is not in people's negative assessment of their lives today, which is really interesting, but more so in their negative lives of the change into, excuse me, not only in their negative assessment of their lives today, but when you look to the future, they still have hope. So if you see that average change over time in their current life satisfaction being between 7 and 10, we see that a lot of people have taken a serious dip. But in terms of anticipated life satisfaction, those who rate their lives at 8 or 10, we've actually seen an improvement. So hope has actually, strangely, ironically, gone up. I think it's because one of the things to consider is that in comparison to what people are experiencing today, there's obviously an expectation that things will get better in the future. Obviously, at Ideagen, we're very focused on SDGs. I wanted to mention to those of you that are unaware that we are tracking 3 of the SDGs currently across the world. Modern day slavery, in partnership with the ILO and the Walk Free Foundation. We are also measuring malnutrition and hunger with the FAO and the United Nations, as well as financial inclusion with the World Bank. One of the things we've been very passionate about doing as we now deploy our polling capacity across the world beyond just where we do phone is really looking for partners to help us track what's happening with COVID and how various institutions and countries and actors are responding to the crisis, where the need is the highest and what that need is. At Ideagen, I know we always talk about data for good. And I've been fortunate to be a part of many wonderful conversations with some of the most critical organizations in the world that have data at the heart of what they do. We are one of those organizations. We see it as our responsibility to use what we've built, the Gallup World Poll, which is primary sampling units that are now consistent across 160 countries, to try to get a reality from the ground view of how this crisis is unfolding for people, not only in terms of healthcare, but also in terms of their economic challenges. The trust in vaccines is something we're already tracking across the world with our partners, Wellcome Trust. And I would only encourage those listening that if you are in an organization that's passionate about this, to reach out to us. We are always looking for opportunities to do good and to use our tools to understand what's going on with these crises across the world. Thank you. I wish you all to be well. And for those who are more interested in our content, I encourage you to go to news.gallup.com. And with that, George, Christian, I hand it back to you. Thanks for having us.
Welcome to the Global Innovation 2030 Digital Summit. Here with us today, we have 2 amazing cloud thought leaders, Chaitra Vidulapalli and Sarah Muckler-Visser. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Cooper. Thank you so much. Well, first is, thank you, everyone. I am Chaitra Vedalapalli. I'm the president of Women in Cloud. We are a community-led economic development organization with the mission to create $1 billion in economic access for female tech entrepreneurs in collaboration with enterprises and also public policymakers. We create these opportunities through the public-private partnership with innovative companies and innovative leaders and thought leaders like Sarah, who's here with us today, and really ensure that women entrepreneurs can be successful. And the way we create this $1 billion in economic impact is building communities, strengthening the policy advancement, and also creating access to enterprise opportunities through training and readiness. And we also closely collaborate with corporations to develop AI solutions through our AI Solutions 2030 program. So today I'm very excited to be part of the annual Ideagen Global Innovation 2030 Digital Summit. So thank you to Ideagen for giving us the opportunity to have Sarah and me here. But as we adjust to the new normal because of the pandemic, we understand it's really hard to focus on business as well as tech when the country is in so much turmoil. So just know we are thinking about you, and we are focused as a collective to create economic access for all. And today we have an amazing guest among us. Let's invite Sarah Muckler-Visser. She's the Senior Director at Microsoft, who leads channel marketing with over 300,000 partners and the entire ecosystem. And to joining Microsoft, she led worldwide health marketing for 15 years in the health IT industry. In this role, she built the industry's largest marketing engine globally, leading to a global health marketing strategy and execution for 194 countries, wow, and 74 subsidiaries, and for the entire Microsoft product suite. And today she's accountable for the world's largest partner channel engine in the cloud IT industry. With that, Sarah, I would love to welcome you to this chat with us with the Ideagen. So as you have created this amazing impact in your career, can you share how do you go about doing such an amazing impact?
Thank you for that awesome intro, Chaitra, and thank you so much, Ideagen. So I feel very blessed in my career. I was raised by a single mother who continued to learn her whole life, and I watched her get a doctorate even in her 60s. And so for me, it's always consistent learning. I mean, there's no way to market into 194 countries without understanding those different cultures and the changes in what they are faced with on a regular basis. And also when it comes to digital marketing and marketing globally, there are always constant changes that are come into play. Algorithms with social media, social causes, etc. Things that come up that you navigate. And so it's always an interesting place of consistent learning. I think most importantly too is surrounding yourself with really smart people, good people that really learn very maybe deep areas of knowledge, demand gen, etc. But really surround yourself with good, smart people that are constantly lifting themselves and lift you and the group. And so that's always been something I've looked for, is just to surround myself with awesome people. And you know, as a leader, the number one thing I look for is how can I, you know, once we attract really good talent, how can we lift those folks to feel empowered to really do what they're capable of, you know, and giving them the tools to just let them shine. And in my experience, when you do that, amazing things can really happen. And so for me, it's just always looking to see how we can also, as leaders, bring energy to what we put on the table, or to what meetings we're in, etc., and to just encourage us people to do their best, but really lifting all tides. I mean, lifting all boats with tide.
Absolutely. And Sarah, you have done such an amazing contribution in the community, and you also focus on contributing to Women in Cloud with so much passion. So thank you for that. And now you're looking into AI for good and cloud for good. What drives you to contribute at the level you contribute?
I really think it's seeing the next generation and seeing also people maybe early in a business development or early in career grow what they're doing. For me, that just drives so much passion in me. I come from a sleepy beach town where, we didn't have access. I wasn't surrounded with highly successful women. I mean, they were successful in what they might be doing, but there weren't big IT companies, et cetera. And so, in giving resources or helping where I can, I'm just paying back to those women and men in my past that have really helped me and believed in me early on.
That is amazing, Sarah. If you remember the last conversation we were having, I learned that you're a mountaineer, and I see a mountaineer is an athlete. And as an athlete, I know it takes a lot of preparation. But for me, I believe as a mountaineer, you would really climb higher heights. So what kind of strategies do you use to lead your team and your channel partners to innovate in the current environment?
Well, so mountaineering is an interesting blend into leadership, because in mountaineering, in addition to having to be physically fit and then mentally fit in order to do it, you really have to plan for all outcomes, because as you get higher on the mountain, it's more difficult to get off or be saved even. And so you really have to plan for anything that can happen. But also in mountaineering, is the same in teams, is that I kind of reflect on a time that happened on Mount St. Helens, when we were climbing up and we came to where there was a lot of volcanic rock, and the snow was so thick that you couldn't see the holes in those rocks. And so where I'm somebody that might rush to the front of a group, or, I love to be in front of a room, etc. I always want to lead. At that moment, I actually had to pause, and I had to step in each step that the more experienced mountaineer in front of me were making with his boots. And so I had to follow, and really be led. And I learned that in teams, when you are looking for that expertise, like I mentioned earlier, somebody with demand gen, when they know, I mean, you sit back and learn. And I think that's the most important thing, is to just understand when to lead, but when taking a step back is actually the best for the whole team.
No, one of the things that I've learned from you is, having that planning for outcomes and then preparing your entire strategies is actually the greatest leadership skill, right? And I know you're passionate about the SDG goals, which I want to know about that. But because you're passionate about the SDG goals, what are the trends and challenges you're seeing that can be solved with AI and cloud innovations? So what are you thinking about in that space?
Well, AI in marketing is so interesting, because, we're moving into this world where we have more insights than we ever have before, and data-driven decisions can be made much better now. You just have clear insights. And so when looking into the certain addressable markets that you need to target, it's really giving us that view that you can say, okay, I'm only going to target this group in this area in France, so to speak. I mean, you're able to do it at that level. AI, when it comes to the SDG goals, what I get the most concerned about is that some, innovations do maybe replace other roles or other jobs. And we do see that impact greatly happening much more to women. And so when I look at the SDG goals, I really think of two main ones. One is reducing inequality, and the other is the gender equality. And so with those, what I would like to do is really encourage people to stop where they are and see what change they can be in the world. And so as women that have more influence or resource, what we want to do is really look for opportunities in our communities to give that exposure to those young women. And with that, where I have found success is not only maybe with the Girl Scout group, but maybe with the local Boy and Girls Club, really searching out those young women that can make a difference in the next generations for us, and showing them, maybe it's not a full internship, but maybe it's a shadowing for a day or two, or even for a week at a time, and just giving them that view as to what they can become.
That is such a great idea, Sarah. I already have something planned for you there. You get to kind of touch and work with us on that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Exactly. So as as you are a global marketing leader at Microsoft, and you're always looking for ways for women to engage in developing solution. So as you talk about how you can innovate these solutions with the channel partners, and make them as CMOs, how can you think about creating access to global customers for the customers to engage, and also create access for women to be part of the economic, growth that they can have?
Yeah, well, one of the largest, or one of the quickest things that somebody can do is do collaborations with large companies like Microsoft or other companies that they may be working with. And we see a lot of partner-to-partner relationships. But when we talk about trends in marketing and that AI, a lot of messaging can sometimes get lost depending on how much is happening in the world. And so if you can collaborate on campaigns and different initiatives with larger companies, you can make a larger splash and have a bigger voice. And so that is something that can be done for sure, very easily, watching those market trends and watching hashtags, etc. But collaborating with other companies can definitely help that.
Yeah, talk about your, the campaigns that are running in market. It's pretty phenomenal. I think people would love to be part of that. Talk about that.
Okay. Well, at Microsoft, we do offer everything that a CMO would need to run campaigns with us for Azure, Microsoft 365, and Dynamics 365. We do provide all the content they need in those ongoing campaigns. Out of the tool that we have, I'm very excited. We hit the 50,000 mark, where partners are running over 50,000 campaigns in the marketplace. And that does provide them with posts every day, all out for 12 weeks, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars in content creation. But I'm very excited about that product. I can't wait to see where it goes next year. But we're always innovating for whatever we can do to best provide our partner ecosystem with all the tools that a CMO would need, that's for sure.
Yeah, and Sarah, that particular solution is phenomenal, because the women who are going through the Cloud Accelerator, they are actually being trained how to use your on-demand campaign, platform that they can leverage and use and grow their company. So that's really good.
We have exciting things to come as far as language and different ways of doing marketing. So I hope that they do love it and stick with us, because we are going to change the MarTech stack as people would know it. That's for sure.
Oh, we're committed. We are coming from Women in Cloud for sure. So Sarah, what advice do you have for us to inspire people to take action and solve SDG goals? Do you have some ideas for people to take action?
It really is what I was talking about earlier. That is where my passion lies in giving, we believe, you can't be what you don't see. And like I said, I come from this small, sleepy beach town where I didn't see, women in big IT companies or at the front of the room, etc. And so I think it's just super important in our local communities to really reach out. And it may not be, it may not be the girls getting the top grades or that sort of thing. It may be somebody who's gone through a lot of change that you hear about. A lot of times I will actually ask the teachers if there's somebody that I can help reach out to and pull them in. But I love to just shadow and maybe I've taken teenagers in and just to watch come in all day, walk around, the campus at Microsoft and just see what it is and look around, and they can see themselves in the faces of other people there. And it's amazing when you can give hope and
Welcome to Ideagen TV. Today we have with us an incredible friend and guest here on Ideagen TV, James Keach, award-winning actor, producer, director, changing the world. James, welcome.
Good to see you, George.
So great to see you, James, and always just such a pleasure to have a conversation with you. I stand in awe, as you know, of your work, and I'd like to begin this interview by asking, why is storytelling so incredibly important to help to change the world?
Well, I think storytelling, obviously, from the cave dwellers to today, they tell the stories of their times, and we're all here for a very limited amount of time, and we use stories to pass forward what has happened in our lifetimes. So and I think that the important thing about storytelling is that if you can change the trajectory of people's human experience through a story, that you've done something special. Then you've left behind something that's very important.
Well, and that's incredible because you've had so many stories that you've told, and we've seen a lot of them. Glenn Campbell, Johnny Cash, and the most recent Linda Ronstadt, which we'll talk about later. But James, what was it like on your first day directing a film, acting in a film, and how were they different?
Well, I was actually talking to somebody the other day about being in front of a camera, and I still, to this day, even though I was an actor for many, many years, I get uncomfortable. I get uncomfortable doing Zoom stuff, and I don't know why. I'm becoming I'm at the point in my life where it doesn't really matter. But anyway, my brother, who I'm very close to, was doing a movie called The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, and I came to the set, and I'd never been on a big Hollywood movie set. And these giant cameras, in those days, the cameras were just huge, and it scared the heck out of me to look at this thing. And he called me Jimmy. Jimmy, what you got to do is you got to say hello to the camera every morning. You say, "Good morning, Mitch." That was a Mitchell camera. "Good morning, Mitch. How you doing, man?" And you look right at him and you make him your friend. And he said, and from that point forward, I started behaving that way. I know it sounds nuts. He said, but because it's there to help you. It's not there to hinder you. But somehow when you get on a set, it's terrifying the first time. You got all these people, hundreds of guys and men and women standing around doing their jobs, and all of a sudden they go, and action, and it's on you. It's
right.
It's about you. You got to come through. And so it's a craft. You have to learn how to do it, and you have to be willing to surrender your self-consciousness. You have to be able to be willing to let that go. And I think so often, many of us in our lives, whether you often heard the thing in public speaking, people get very nervous about public speaking. And when I would teach acting, I would say to them, we all have this little critic that lives out here. It's always telling us, you can't do that. You shouldn't say this. You shouldn't say that. You got to say to the critic, "Thanks for sharing, but go away. You're not helping me. I need to do this." Because we all have it. The critic is always working on us. So that's part of being mindful and being evolved as a person. It takes time to do that. So
that is awesome. And so how does that differ from being behind the camera and directing? It's obviously different, but where do you see what is more sort of impactful from your vantage point?
Well, I think it depends on what type of directing you're doing. If you're directing scripted films where the actors are playing characters, each character has a specific intention to push the story forward. Even if you're playing the bad, you're playing the bad guy, your intention is to do something, or you're good, so your intention is to be to tell the story. And I keep looking for truth in both instances. I keep looking for somebody, if you're doing a documentary, if they're canned statements that and you can always tell it. You can certainly you've been in the political world. You know when people are, they're reading from here or reading from here, and they're not coming from here. So what you want to do is have people come from here in both instances, both in narrative filmmaking and in documentary filmmaking, because that's what connects with the audience. If they feel that their heart, if somebody is talking to you from their heart and their souls, then you connect with them, hopefully, anyway.
Well, and that's what's so fascinating about your current focus on telling these incredibly powerful stories, these narratives, these documentaries that you're putting together in one of the most impactful ways that I've ever seen in my life. The Glenn Campbell story, the Johnny Cash film, I'll Be Me, the Glenn Campbell story, and Walk the Line, Johnny Cash, and now Linda Ronstadt's film documentary. What drives you in helping to tell these stories, and what do you see as the biggest impact, James, from being able to highlight and connect celebrity with, for example, some of these diseases that are, have no treatments and sometimes definitely no cures? What do you see as the accelerant behind those?
Well, I think in the case of Alzheimer's, in the case of Glenn Campbell, he wanted the audience to know what Alzheimer's looked like up close and personal, and he wasn't afraid to show us warts and all, the gnarly truth. And I think it was important for people to see it, to make people more aware of just what families go through. His family wanted other people to see what caregivers go through, and I think it's inspired a new generation of financial support for the Alzheimer's situation that we have in our country. I mean, 1 out of 2 of us who hit the age of 85 are going to have Alzheimer's. So it's a pretty staggering statistic. And Glenn, was able to connect on an emotional level like never any other film that had ever been made about Alzheimer's, because you have a guy who's singing. I thought we were going to do 5 shows when they asked me to do it, and it turned out to be 171 with a guy with Alzheimer's. So it came from doing Walk the Line, which is a narrative film, but Johnny's story was about finding God, and also dealing with his own addiction. I mean, all of us have stuff. And I had somebody call me up after watching Walk the Line, and they were having real serious problems with their marriage, and I guess there'd been some infidelity or something that was not, which in our world is not. It's been going on for a long time. In long-term marriages. At any rate, she said, I want to thank you for making the film. So why is that? She said, because I've forgiven my husband. I've chosen to forgive him. And so the film was about forgiveness, and about forgiving yourself and about forgiving others. And that really inspired me. It's inspiration when you can. In this case, I knew the person, but there's so many people that I will never meet, and God willing, they will be affected by the films that we leave behind, and they'll see something of themselves in there, and hopefully be entertained, and that's what.
And when you see that, James, it has to be incredibly rewarding, obviously, but also a testament to you and your leadership and your experience, and you're choosing to do this. I mean, no one's saying, James, here you go, at this point in your career, you're going to tell these incredibly powerful stories. I mean, what's beautiful about where you are is you're able to pick and choose the stories that you tell. And right? I mean,
well, yeah, but somehow they choose me.
That's right. That's right.
Johnny asked me to do it. Glenn asked me to do it. I figure there's got to be something working here. They come and they ask you to do it, and you go, okay, let's see what happens, and they don't all work out. Believe me, there's the road is paved, you know, with some bumps in it. Let me tell you, it's not easy making these things either. But
Well,
at the end of the day, when you have, it's very gratifying to know that you've touched some people and their families.
yeah, and that's such a good point. I mean, I have seen personally and professionally the millions of people that you've touched through your work. I mean, it's just profound, and it has to be incredibly rewarding. And here's Hollywood now, right? It's a powerful medium. It's a very powerful medium, and you're part of that. You're in Hollywood. How can it be used for good? How can this Hollywood medium be used for good?
Well, it could be used for good by telling stories of people, men and women who have, I think, made a difference to the human condition. It's also very important for people to laugh, you know, and to be entertained. So it's not, it can't all be, you know, movies that, you know, I mean, great love stories, great, you know, I think entertainment is very, very important. And I think it's the opportunity. I mean, it's our opportunity now. We used to, I mean, literature is very important in reading, but I think now the medium is film, is what we're doing right now. This is how our kids communicate every single day, you know. And so it's back to storytelling, and it's also being able to choose your hero and choose what they want, you know, hopefully if they're noble things that they want, and show what's preventing them from getting it, and then, you know, sharing that story. That Petty Chayefsky used to say, who is your hero? What do they want? What's preventing them from getting it? He was a great writer. And that's kind of the story of our lives, you know. You know, who are we? What do we want? And what's preventing us from getting it? You know, and what's going on today with COVID-19? Who is our hero? The scientists. What do they want? A cure. What's preventing them from getting it? You know, a lot of stuff. And, you know, and the same thing with what's going on in our streets today with the riots that have been taking place. These people, Black people, they want to be treated equally, not just a bunch of people talking, you know, oh, it's terrible what happened. We have to do things that make it so. We have to make sure that the laws are changed and that they're honored and that they're not relegated to live in the ghettos. You know, I mean, there's so much work to be done, but it has to be the collective consciousness of everybody, and film and television and this medium can help the cure. It can help tell the stories, you know.
That's exactly right. And, you know, shifting just a bit to an issue that I know you're very well versed in and very supportive of, and that's the 17 global goals of the United Nations. Those 17 broad goals that talk about things like what you just alluded to, like equality for all, eradicating poverty, access to education, energy, you know, all clean water, partnerships, all the things that you're working on daily in your work in storytelling in Hollywood and all the work that you're doing connect to all of these 17 goals. How do you believe we can achieve these goals? I mean, do you think it's going to happen by 2030, James? Do you think, you know, what's happened in the past few months with the pandemic and beyond have either set us back, or do you think we're going to now have a greater consciousness and maybe the world comes together in a more cohesive way? What's your sense there?
Well, my sense is that we have to be in the efforts business. That I can't tell you whether we're going to achieve it by 2030. I can tell you that we won't achieve it if we don't make the efforts to get there.
That's right.
And so I think that's the business that we have to be in, the efforts business, and we gotta do everything we can. And from an individual standpoint, it's not them who's going to fix it; it's us.
Right. That's right.
And so often we think it's somewhere out there. Somebody out there is going to fix my life. Well, that might be true in terms of a bank loan or something like that. But in terms of the spiritual condition of all of us, it's an inside job.
That's right.
It's an inside job. And so we have to be in the efforts business. And as a society, we have to be, I believe, more conscious of the plight of others. We cannot be indifferent and apathetic to other people's situation. We just can't. And that's what's happened over and over and over again. It just keeps repeating itself, and it's sad. But we need voices of people to stand forward and not be worried about being elected again, be worried about being in their values today, stand for their values now, what's right, not what's going to serve me, but what's going to serve the world and the collective consciousness of humanity. And that's what the United Nations, God willing, is about, you know, and that's why it's important, the work that you guys are doing. So.
Yeah. Thank you, James. Thank you. That's incredible perspective, of course. And so how do you believe the global pandemic, in your opinion, has changed Hollywood and media forever?
Well,
how?
First of all, a lot of the pitch sessions that we do now, instead of driving all the way downtown, we do them like this. We tell the stories, and the writers go to work after a Zoom meeting, as opposed to, so it's changing. And in that sense, I am not sure how the movie sets are going to come back. And you know, finding a cure is very, very important. For the I mean, imagine doing a love scene in Hollywood, you know, and being worried about having them, you know, having COVID. You know, it's going to change everything, but we'll evolve there. We'll get there, you know. We'll get.
Yeah, good point. It's a good point. And you know, just simply eating out at a restaurant has changed until there's at least a vaccine or some type of treatment. And you see so many millions of people now out of work because of that. How has your work specifically and perspective been changed by our current global circumstances?
Well, I have films that I have to shoot, and I'm not able to. It's really hard to go shoot right now. It's hard to get on a plane, you know, put all our film equipment, all our cameras, gear, you know, fly to Atlanta, you know, go interview people, you know, it's near to impossible. You know, because first of all, you get a lot of people who say, I don't think I want to travel, you know, and then, so it's made it very, very difficult. We're actually today, I've got to figure out a shooting schedule, you know, we have to do a little addition to another film that we made. And, you know, I got to figure out, well, do I hire a cameraman in Atlanta? Do I not go there? Do I not get on you know, it makes it so different and difficult, but, you know, we'll figure it out.
That's right.
We just will. We have to.
We will, and we have to for sure.
Yeah.
And so just shifting a bit, what, James, is your favorite film documentary that you developed and why?
Oh.
I know, it's a tough one. They're all great.
My favorite film, I think well, I love Walk the Line. And I love what that was about, because it was also about a very dear friend of friends, June and John of mine. That's a tough question. You know, you know, they're all my children, George.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know that's a tough question, and it's interesting to hear. I know they're all special in different ways, so it's hard to single out one.
They all have one thing in common. They're all spiritual journeys of the soul.
Incredible.
And that you know, they're all those people that we've worked on, you know, telling their stories. They all are unique and different in their own way, but they somehow, each one of them has changed my life. And so that, for me as a filmmaker, that's one of the things that is really interesting. You know, you go in and you say, I didn't know this about them. I didn't know about their music. I didn't know about where they came from. I didn't know about their parents. I didn't know so many things. And then by the end of it, you know them very, very well. But what they, you know, Glenn Campbell would constantly say, I got to tell the truth. You got to tell the truth, James. You got to tell the truth. By the end of it, you know, it's like, I wouldn't even move the golf ball, you know, an inch, because I wouldn't be hitting the shot that I was supposed to, you know, that kind of thing. It's like, and you know, Linda, the grace in which she lives with her Parkinson's, she does not want to talk about it. She does not want me to talk about it as a filmmaker. Whereas some people would say, oh, let's feel sorry for me, and oh, I have this thing. No, she says, I am not Parkinson's. I have it, but I am not Parkinson's. You know, so they're teachers. All these people are teachers. So that's also the power of film. If you can create characters that can teach you some, I'm not saying they all have to be, you know, heavy and, I learned from Will Ferrell a lot in his comedies. I love to laugh,
Yeah.
And I love to laugh.
Love Will Ferrell.
Yeah, but because he's always winking at the audience. He's always saying, this isn't really real. I'm playing a character.
Right.
And have some fun here, which is a message to all of us. Enjoy your life, man.
Yeah, that's right.
Fun. Have some laughs along the way. Just don't hurt anybody while you're doing it,
That's right. That's right. So I guess that's perfect. A perfect segue to what, if you could, what would you change? What is one thing in the world you would change if you had that magic wand and could do it today?
I would change the values of politicians in our country. I would have them become what the West Point motto is: duty, honor, country. We will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I would like to bring back honor and truth and trust. I used to believe that when the government said something, I used to believe when newspapers said something, oh, well, that's the truth. Well, I've discovered that isn't the truth, that it's just somebody's opinion trying to sell a newspaper. And I've discovered that in my lifetime that the government, a lot of times they're out for political gains and they're trying to manipulate their side of things so that they can have an economic gain down the line.
Right.
That's what I would change. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. I just want to believe that they're honorable people with deep values, and that they believe what they believe.
Mm-hmm.
For real. It's good to have Democrats and Republicans. It's good to have independent free speech, but it's not good to have people that are without values.
Well, I think, in we've heard a lot of this in interviews like this, where there's not really one trusted source of information anymore on anything. I mean, if you want to find out information on X topic, you Google it and 30 million results come up. And so while there's been a wonderful increase in the number of sources of information, look, when I was a kid, we had the evening news. Well, like it or not, we all sat there with my grandparents and we watched the news, and that was the news of the day. And it was, you had the Surgeon General, and the Surgeon General was the authority on health matters in the United States or whatever. And you would say, okay, the Surgeon General issued a report on X. Now you have 30 million sources of health information. Anything you want to hear, anything you believe, you can just Google it and you'll live in that world. And I think that's part of the issue, is that there's almost too much information and there's no stamp of approval on what it is that, this is legit. This is the correct, unabated source of information, right? Including any source that you just mentioned. So it's frustrating for a lot of people across the planet, not just in the United States, across the planet. So it's incredible perspective that you bring. And I think, politics is another one. I mean, it is what it is. So why is it important, James, to highlight physical challenges of folks like you do, like well-known celebrities? Like, why do you find that to be so powerful? Why do they find you to be the perfect person to help tell that story? And then how does that then help accelerate what we talked about a little bit earlier, treatments and or potential cures? How does that all come together?
Well, I don't know if I'm the perfect person for any of it, but I do know that all of us are going to have something. Sooner or later, the guy in the white coat's going to say, James, we got a problem. And so it's how people deal with the circumstances of their life. And I think that there's lessons in that for all of us. How do we deal with, everybody's got stuff, and it's how we deal with it. And it's also the acceptance of what life is. So often people in Hollywood all over the country, they have to, and I'm not against Botox and I'm not against, plastic surgery. I'm not saying that, but so often they don't accept who they are, just as they are. They want to change who they are all the time and kind of, and I don't mean it's okay to want to change, but it's not okay to want to hide, and to hide the truth. And so I think, so often people that I've known that have been ill, both mentally or physically, when they share their truth, they are freer, and their lives become more enriched, because then all of a sudden people connect with them. And if they push them away and they don't tell the truth about how they're feeling and what the situation is, then there's no way to solve it. And there's no way to feel the compassion and empathy that they would like to have. So, I'm not necessarily attracted to people that have ailments. I just know that we all do. And it just happened that in this instance, a couple of these people did have that situation.
Yeah, and you're harnessing the power of the medium to be able to highlight that story. Clinical trials, the dearth of participants in these clinical trials to help accelerate the development of a treatment or a cure for so many diseases. I mean, you've helped, by storytelling, by helping to bring these real stories of individuals that happen to be very well known. So then that helps someone connect with someone who perhaps was their idol, like a Johnny Cash or a Glenn Campbell or a Linda Ronstadt, for example, to say, my gosh, I adored them. They have this ailment, whatever it may be. How can I help? Oh, I can sign up for a clinical trial. Or, my gosh, I should support science or organizations that are helping to further research on these issues. I mean, you've been a catalyst for helping to tell the story of these scientists, the unsung heroes, right?
Right. I think a lot of people, and I agree that drug prices are high, but drug companies aren't just about money. They're about science. And what people have to understand is that in order to find a cure for Alzheimer's or anything, it costs, well, so far, I don't know, they've spent maybe $30-40 billion in trying to find a cure, haven't been able to get there yet. That's a lot of money, man.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just very important that we keep a balance and we have tolerance, but again, it's also making it possible for people who don't have a voice to have a voice. That's the job of a filmmaker. That's the job of communicators, that, to help other people that don't have it.
Yeah.
I mean, you said something about education, and when you're talking about the United Nations, education is, I think, the most important. Obviously, water and things like that are desperately important. Just the basic human needs. But after that,
yeah,
I think education is so important. I think one of the reasons we have such problems in our country is that our education system is really messed up. And I mean, listen, I can sit here and wax on about what we need. I'm not sure how to fix it, but I do know that we need people. I heard something the other day that was kind of funny. He said, if you're going to be a football player, you got to know how to play football. And if you're going to be a doctor, you got to go to med school. And if you're going to be a lawyer, you got to go to law school. And if you're going to be an actor, you better learn something about acting. But if you want to go into government, you just go to government. You just get elected, and all of a sudden you're there. That's kind of, I'm not talking about the people that are career government people. Those people are the ones that I have tremendous respect for, because they work in administration, but Republican or Democrat. They're career people, and they understand how the system works and how to keep the machine moving forward. And I just think that we need to have more people in our leadership that have been trained to be leaders.
Well, and that's a fundamental fact here that you bring light of. I think what you also brought to light during this interview, which I think is incredibly inspiring, especially during these times, is empathy. We've been talking a lot recently about empathy, and our late chairman, former Congressman Louis Stokes, he was a statesman. You knew Lou, and he talked about working with his mother, single parent, taught him to work with his head so he doesn't have to work with his hands. So that he and his brother could focus on their education, to your point. And he said, you know, George, no one could ever take that away from me. No one could ever take that away from Lewis Stokes and his statesmanship. And he also used to tell me over and over again, you've got to work within the system to change the system.
Right.
Lewis Stokes. He worked within the U.S. Congress for 30 years to continue story after story. We could go on and on about what that man did, but working within the system to change that system. And it started with his mother, and he knew how hard she had worked when he held her hand when she was dying, and he felt the calluses on her hands and realized, my gosh, my mom paid the ultimate price. She worked with her hands, and here she was telling her sons to work with their head so they don't have to work with their hands. James Keach, award-winning actor, producer, director, philanthropist, incredible human being, leader. I could go on and on for days. What is up next for you in the incredible game-changing work you're doing, including your most recent documentary on Linda Ronstadt?
Well, actually, we have another film about Linda Ronstadt. It's called Linda and the Mockingbirds. Linda, in order to do an interview for The Sound of My Voice, which is the documentary that just came out, she said, James, would you guys come to Mexico with me with Jackson Brown and 50 or 30 Latino musicians and singers? I support this school up in San Francisco called Los Sensotles, which means the Mockingbirds. And she said, and I'll do your interview there. I won't do it in San Francisco. So we went with them on a trip across the border, and it was at the time when all the terrible things were going on at the border. So it became a film about, it's a musical film about immigration, about family, about dealing with the truth in her life, a little bit about her Parkinson's. It's really a beautiful film, and I'm really proud of it. So we just finished that one, and we have other films that we're doing. We're going to do the Glenn Campbell narrative, like we did Walk the Line.
Okay.
And we're going to do Linda Ronstadt's narrative, you know, and hopefully going to be doing a film about West Point, which that's when I keep talking about duty, honor, country with HR, with HR. And who's a great man. He's got a book coming out right now. I think it probably dropped yesterday, called Battlegrounds. I'm excited to read that. What a great man he is. And we got a lot
HR
of
McMaster.
Yeah,
Great man.
he's a great man.
Absolutely.
Right.
How can folks find the Linda Ronstadt film, the current one? Is it on Amazon?
Amazon, HBO Max. Yeah.
And what's the name of it?
The Sound of My Voice.
The Sound of My Voice on Amazon and HBO Max. Find it today. Inspiring. James Keach, changing the world. We'll be back with you. Thank you for all you're doing, my friend.
You too, George. You too. Thanks a lot.
Welcome to Ideagen TV. We're ecstatic today to have with us Charlotte Keenan, Global Head of 10,000 Women, along with Shanice Lojedi, Global CEO, Group CEO of Blue Flamingo. And what an incredible opportunity to hear stories about 10,000 women in the incredible program at Goldman Sachs. Here we go.
The Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women program has been a game changer for my business. There's never a time where you should pass up an opportunity to learn. My name is Shanice Lojide. I am the co-founder and group CEO of Blue Flamingo Digital Africa, a digital marketing and advertising agency that's based out of South Africa with physical locations in Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. I just really wanted to create an environment in a business that was different from the kinds of environment that I had been in, where there was no support, they were not enabling. And I just said, look, there must be a different way to do business. I think the most difficult thing about running a business is actually confronting your own weaknesses. I realized that your team cannot grow any further than you as a leader. What drew me to the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women program was the combination of personal leadership learning of who you are in your place as a woman, combined with finances, forecasting, goal setting, how to manage your team. If I was to pick the most valuable things I've learned doing an annual budget as opposed to like a month-on-month budget, we get so busy as entrepreneurs just trying to keep the ship afloat that we don't have the luxury of introspecting. So don't imagine you have all the answers until you do this course. You will definitely come away from it having learned so much.
Shanice, what an incredible video. Obviously very impressive. And can you tell us a bit more about your business? And wow, you know, I'm always fascinated by origin stories. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to become an entrepreneur.
Absolutely, George. My origin story literally is an origin story. I started my first business when I was 8 years old, selling my neighbor's guavas. But don't worry, I gave him a fair cut of the proceeds because I'm ethical like that. And my sister and I started our business 11 years ago in Uganda, a very remote country in Africa. And we since, blood, sweat, and tears, the entrepreneurial journey hasn't always been an easy one. But I think we really wanted to create a business that was, fun, that was respectful of the people that were in it, that really added value, and at the same time created, a space where people could come and enjoy themselves. And I think through that, the business expanded and grew. And 11 years later, here we are in 5 African countries. And we've pivoted to digital education and training. We create content as well. It's not been without its challenges. And quite honestly, the Goldman Sachs program came at a time where we just needed to build on what we had created in a way that could be sustainable and scalable and create more long-term value. But all in all, the journey started with just a girl who just dreamed. And along the way, there was a lot of necessity, George. So I was employed for quite a while. And I realized that if I had to continue putting myself and my sister through school, that I would absolutely have to find an income stream that was a bit better than what I had at the moment. And that's how I started Blue Flamingo.
You know, there's an incredible opportunity to be inspired here with our global audience. And what a story, Shanice. I mean, that is just awesome to be able to dream and then bring your dream to life. And that's what you've described. And a moment of applause here for Goldman Sachs for recognizing the incredible opportunities that these businesses can provide to their communities and the impact that can then, emanate from that. And so turning to Charlotte, welcome as well.
Thank you.
How does 10,000 Women look like now as compared to 2008? And what have you learned along the way?
Well, George, thank you for having us today. And also, it's such a pleasure, Shanice, to be back with you. The very last event that we did for 10,000 Women before lockdown was Shanice and I in Johannesburg together for our Africa conference. And what a different world we are in now. So, George, yes, absolutely. 10,000 Women, we launched it in 2008. The idea being to support female entrepreneurs everywhere with access to a world-leading, world-beating business education, with mentoring support and with capital. And we worked with business schools across the world in over 50 countries to train, support, mentor these extraordinary women, just as you've seen with Shanice, and in many ways helping to unlock the latent potential of the world's female entrepreneurs. skip forward to where we are now and what we've learned, look, I think the most amazing thing has been, frankly, the individual stories. Shawnice is one of over 10,000, and that's been a truly humbling and truly extraordinary experience for us at Goldman. It's been an absolute privilege. It's a journey that we've evolved. Along the way, we introduced a capital component in partnership with IFC and the World Bank, recognizing that female entrepreneurs need access to capital. And then we realized just a couple of years ago that we wanted to make this available to women anywhere, wherever they may be, at whatever stage of their business journey. And that's when we took the program online and met Shawnice as our inaugural growth fellow through that program. So it's been an absolutely incredible journey that we are still on and still working together with these amazing women.
You know, it really sounds like it's an incredible journey. And who would have thought that just a few months ago, we were in January and we were looking at 3,500 odd some days to 2030. As you both know, Ideagen has a virtual backdrop of trying to develop awareness, ultimately to help achieve the global goals, those 17 global goals of the United Nations. And here we are a few months later, and who would have thought where we would be? A global pandemic, we have a global crisis underway, and speaking of this, current crisis, and needless to say, it's having an outsized impact on small business leaders and businesses in general, literally across the planet. And by the way, this may be the very first time in the history of the world where the entire planet is experiencing exactly the same thing. We have a common enemy in this virus. There have been lockdowns and stay-at-home orders across the entire planet and every corner of the globe.
Yeah.
Shawnice, how have you pivoted and perhaps most importantly, innovated your business strategy to ensure that you stay relevant to your clients, especially during this time?
It's been a really interesting time, George. And to be honest, we're still figuring that out. What we did in the first couple of months when we realized that lockdown was going to affect not just our business, but our clients' businesses and more, we went through kind of a curve. And we had a lot of clients calling us saying, we need to cancel our contracts. We need to, and the interesting thing was we had to drop our hats for a moment and put on the most empathetic hats we could, even though we ourselves were worried and concerned about our own teams. And I think that's what will get small businesses and big businesses through this is empathy for one another. Right now, we're building what I like to call transitional behaviors. And we're hoping that those transitional behaviors will take us to transformational behaviors. Some of the transitional behaviors we've put in place is involving our teams in literally every decision. Right now, we're talking to our teams about whether we should pay half salary for now until things get better, whether we should go back to the office. We are not making unilateral decisions anymore. And it is a strain on the team because they have to take on sort of a more managerial role. But it's amazing the sense of camaraderie and just coming to the table that everybody has. We've taken that same approach with our clients. Our clients are now not just, there's almost like that barrier that's been removed between us and our clients, where we're talking to them like stakeholders. We're talking to them like we're in this together. What do you need us to do? How can you support us so we don't go under, so we can continue to support you? We've been very blessed that we're in the digital space. And right now the digital space is the one area that everybody has really been putting emphasis on as being able to continue business's strategy, whether it's e-commerce, whether it is online marketing. So we've been very fortunate that our business hasn't taken that much of a hit, but we still have seen some major changes and some major shifts. And it's very interesting, but what we've done is we've actually charted our trajectory for the first 3-4 weeks, and we're building a little graphical story of the things that we did and how we've managed to sort of navigate this time, because we think it might be able to help other small businesses to figure out what to do in their businesses as well to help them stay afloat. So we're all trying to figure it out together, but it's really about collaboration now more than ever. We've collaborated with other agencies where we've taken on some of their business because they've been adversely affected. And we're working together now rather than competing. And in a weird way, I think that this is a beautiful thing. It doesn't mean that I wish we couldn't go back to normal, and I wish the pandemic had never happened. But we are definitely, if I can be so bold to say, we're making lemonade.
Oh my gosh, you just used a lot of my vernacular. Lemons to lemonade, co-opetition. I mean, these are really critical elements in resiliency. Yeah. The companies and organizations that survive situations like this seem to be those that had some strategic foresight built into their operational planning. And I think that's what Goldman Sachs and 10,000 Women helps businesses do, is they help you develop the strategy to create these partnerships in good times as well, so that you understand these core capacities before anything happens. And then, God forbid, something happens like it has, you're able to pick up the phone and understand what either your competitors do or what other types of businesses and other sectors do. Because at Ideagen, we've been talking about cross-sector collaboration for a very long time. And what you see now, you see it in government, you see it in business, you see it in the NGO world. Those businesses that had forged relationships and partnerships with other cross-sector type businesses, or even within their own sector, and took the time to do that, can now pivot in a way that helps them see around the corner. And no one can really see fully around the corner, but you have an idea that through this, and what you just described is just incredible, and really a perfect roadmap for every business, large and small, like you said, across the planet. Charlotte, 12 years ago, when Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women first launched, the situation was very similar to what we're facing today. Crisis and uncertainty, etc. What is different this time? And how do you want to help women during this difficult period of time?
Well, firstly, I'm going to create a case study out of Shawnice's business to make available to all of our other businesses throughout the network. Look, there is a huge amount that is in common with what we went through in 2008. Huge uncertainty, likely global recession, and small businesses the world over feeling the disproportionate impact of what's going on. However, as the pandemic hopefully comes to an end, who knows what the new normal will be? There's a huge amount of debate and discussion around this. Are we fundamentally accelerating trends that were already happening around digitization, greater use of technology, different working practices, or is something more fundamental shifting? But two things are clear. One, in this backdrop, as in 2008, small businesses the world over are the bedrock and the cornerstone of economic recovery. And that's why we decided to support them then. And it's why we're continuing and doing even more to support them now. And that's why we're, secondly, expanding the launch and the reach and the access of 10,000 Women online so that more female entrepreneurs can do it. And that, with all the other resources and support that we're bringing from Goldman Sachs, but as you've mentioned, coming together with our peers, with governments, with the nonprofit sector, to support business owners is absolutely fundamental for us to rebuild our societies.
And that I agree with you. First of all, I think a case study on Shawnice's business and what you've done together would be incredibly helpful for so many. I mean, contextualizing what she has gone through with her business. Forget about the fact that she's, operating in so many different countries, which obviously has its own complexity. But the ability to pivot so quickly. We have so many different CEOs and global leaders that are talking about the acceleration of their planning. Those that had a bucket list of items that they were looking to achieve have now accelerated in many ways, and they're achieving things in 6 to 8 weeks that they had on their long-term planning for 3 to 5 years.
Right.
So I'm sure, Shanice, this is what you're going through right now and what you just described. And by the way, this online training now available to women across the planet online, profound on so many different levels, and I applaud you personally and professionally for that, is incredibly important. And so, Charlotte, tell us a little bit more about the online course. What will participants learn from that?
Yes, so we took a decade of in-classroom learning, worked with a number of academics around the world from many of the different countries in which we've been working in, and basically took the best of. So in many ways, it's a best of and highlights of 10,000 women. It's highly practical, it's applied, and bite-sized. And in many ways, the easiest to describe it is like a mini MBA, so that a user can dip and dive, take a course on leadership, cash flow, finance planning, or take all 10 modules, which are now available also in different languages, and work through the full element of how to plan, build, grow, reimagine your business. And then those individuals that complete all 10 modules become a member of our global 10,000 women alumni community, having access to extra education, support, thought leadership. So it's been incredibly powerful and an amazing resource for women who, let's face it, are often at home. Most of us have been stuck at home in lockdown, and it's really designed in a manageable way that when you need something to help you or help you rethink or help you redo your cash flow, this is a grounding base for you to be able to pull your business through at a not just at a time like this, but in ordinary days as well.
Well, and it takes an extraordinary sense of multitasking and an ability to multitask to be an entrepreneur. I obviously know that personally and professionally, but it's just amazing to see. So how does this all fit within the larger measures Goldman Sachs is taking to help empower women-owned businesses across the planet and within the broader functioning of the organization?
Yeah, so I'll talk particularly about what we've been doing recently, because I think it's been such extraordinary times, and as you say, we've accelerated things that were on the bucket list for 5 years hence. And George, it's really varied as well considerably market to market, depending very much on the state of the lockdown, what our graduates needed, and what local governments and so forth were offering. So for example, in the US, with our sister program, 10,000 Small Businesses, we launched a $500 million loan facility. In the UK, we've launched a brand new online course to help businesses to repivot, reimagine their businesses. Across the world, we have made our Goldman Sachs employees available to help mentor and coach our small business graduates, and that can vary from someone in investment banking helping rethink a new financial plan, all the way to someone just listening. And I'm sure, as Shanice would say, it's a lonely, challenging, and difficult time for many of these entrepreneurs. So it's consistently globally been a focus of a huge amount of support. We've been working with these businesses for 12 plus years, and we want to be sure that they are here at the end of the crisis, stronger and repositioned to do even more, and we'll be there as long as it takes.
Well, what a commitment by Goldman Sachs. I mean, clearly it's heartening to hear and really just amazing to see the leadership. I'm a strong believer in leadership, and it starts at the top and it sets a tone. And I really love what Shanice started with on the empathy side of things. I mean, I've heard in so many different interviews, leaders talking about empathy. And in one interview during this summit will be with Kate Johnson, the president of Microsoft, who you'll hear just an incredible discussion I had with her about empathy. But, you know, in terms of what we're seeing today, and Shanice, what you're going through, what you've been through to start your business and to end up in this place where you're plowing through a global crisis in a very interesting and difficult, but yeah, on some level, connective moment where you're looking at the totality of the impact. Shanice, how are you helping your business? How are you resilient during this time? How are you pushing through this global situation?
You know, when I think about it, I think that when you spend a lot of time worrying about your problems and thinking about yourself, it makes any crisis worse. When you think about how you can be helpful, when you think about other people other than yourself and put yourself in their shoes and what they're going through, you quickly realize that a lot of people have it 10 times worse than you do. And it builds a spirit of gratitude, and a spirit of gratitude insulates your mind against depression, against, depression and gratitude just can't exist in the same space. And I think a leader's most important asset is their mind. If you can get to a Zen-like place where you can begin to understand that everything that we experience and go through, we give it meaning, then you're able to see opportunities where other people don't. And I think this is the true superpower of an entrepreneur that we need to learn and teach and hone. It's the ability to see how to be of value no matter what it looks like, what the landscape looks like, whether or not you feel like you're in Alice in Wonderland and down is up and up is down, which is how I feel a lot of days these days. But I remember that my team is looking to me. So what is getting me through this and what is helping me through this is really that when the worry starts to creep in, I literally pivot and I switch and I start to think about how I can help my clients, how I can help other business leaders, how I can reach out. I don't reach out and start with, oh, I need this. I reach out and start with, how can I help you? What are you going through? Let's talk this through. And I've noticed that the opportunities start to come when I started to teach my team to approach it from that angle as well. So we've literally had daily stand-ins where we don't ask the question, how do we get out of this anymore? We ask the question, who can we help today? And I think that's been a real game changer, because when I did the online Goldman Sachs program, one of the things they teach you is self-leadership, is how to not feel so alone. And I think the way to not feel so alone is to develop a post-heroic leadership model. You can't be the heroic leader who's got all the answers. And post-COVID-19 is teaching this so poignantly that actually we don't have all the answers. And we need to start looking to people who are looking to us to co-create the world we want to see. So I think, I'm sorry I can't give a 10-point, this is how you do it. I can only speak from my own experience and say that for me, this is what has helped me build resiliency, and has most importantly helped me teach that resilience to my team, alongside exercise and yoga, of course, and lots of prayer.
Well, that is just a simply profound answer to what was a fairly simple question. I mean, it goes to mental toughness as an entrepreneur. It goes to what you mentioned as the Zen-like, state that you have to be in when you're running a business in a multi-country business like you are. And, your poise and leadership is remarkable. It's evident during this interview, and it's a perspective, right? And I think when you have the basic fundamental knowledge that is being taught through the online program, the 10,000 Women program, you then have the confidence and the ability to think beyond just the day-to-day. And what you just articulated with the ethos of helping others during this time, as we've seen across the planet, first responders and
Right.
businesses and restaurant owners and hospital workers and police and fire and EMS and everybody else coming together to help their communities during this time selflessly, I think is remarkable. And that's what you're describing. And what an incredible lesson. What an absolutely incredible lesson. You're even reminding me today that, you know what, we need to start with how do we help others?
Yeah.
Right, Charlotte? I mean, that's
Exactly.
what a message. If that was your only message, I would say this is an incredible interview. How do we help others? And by the way, you're getting the fruits of that ethos because people recognize that you're authentic, that you have empathy. And these are things that if you have a focus on and you build them into the business model, then it can be part of the everyday, organizational structure and strategy. And so I'm at a loss for words, not often at a loss for words, but I see this as an incredible. When you said you don't have a multi-point strategy, you actually have a one-point strategy, which is in this moment, in this global situation, help others.
Yeah. 100%.
What a lesson.
100%.
So, so Charlotte, what are you seeing from other women entrepreneurs in your network as they navigate the impact, the across the board impact of this global pandemic?
Wow. I mean, it's been absolutely sobering, I think is the first thing that I would say. Right from we have women that we have worked with and been through the program in Wuhan. So, right in the very, very early days, seeing those businesses pivot. There's one that comes to mind, an amazing woman who has a florist and, very quickly pivoted that to be an e-commerce company. And that's stories, reminiscent of stories that we've seen now throughout the world, from South Africa to Peru, India, in all of the countries in which we work. And in those early days, we surveyed all of our businesses to see, how they were coping and how they thought they would cope. And look, the results weren't pretty, and the stats weren't good. Over 50% at one stage said they didn't think that they would survive 6 months. And now we're 2 months on from that. And actually things are much, much better than I think we originally thought. And that's because of individuals like Shawnice and many others like her. And what we see above all from this community of entrepreneurs is resilience, is innovation. They're helping each other, they're reaching out. We've seen a number of businesses start new ventures together. One producing, 3 businesses came together to produce hand sanitizer. Many are helping produce PPE kits. So again, it's that, this is what I think distinguishes, these entrepreneurs is an ability to innovate, to see what's around the corner, to be prepared, to move quickly and be nimble. So as it stands now, yes, it's extraordinarily difficult, and there are many stories of teams being smaller, redundancies, very, very difficult times. But we're ultimately optimistic and hopeful, and the community. The thing that I'm most touched by is actually that our community of businesses is much, much stronger. It was strong going into the crisis. It's much stronger standing where we are now. And that's because business owners are reaching out to each other, connecting with each other, wanting that support and wanting that contact. So hopefully we continue on this trend.
Well, exactly. And what an incredible example we have with us today in Shawnice, in looking at the exact example of someone who's been through the 10,000 Women program online and has the fundamental understanding of looking beyond just the immediate. We're in a global crisis. We all understand that. But how can we come out better, stronger, faster, perhaps bigger in any of the businesses that we're running? and especially a woman-owned business, which I can tell you from personal experience. My wife runs her own, and she's beginning the 10,000 Women Online program, and she feels empowered by what she's learning, and the ability to have that network is also critical, because it's not easy. By the way, none of this is easy.
None of it.
Anyone who tells you it's easy, I can tell you firsthand, it's not easy. And so I just stand in awe of what Goldman Sachs has done here to make a concerted effort, a focus on these women-owned businesses across the planet. I mean, I can say it, but we have someone here who's been through the program who says, "Yep, I can see past this. I can see a better future, perhaps. I can see a more resilient business model." And that, to me, is everything you need to know about what 10,000 Women is and stands for. And so, Shanice, a question. What are some of the biggest myths about being an entrepreneur? And how do you try to combat them?
I think some of the biggest myths have been busted, and that people say, "Oh, I want to work for myself." Actually, everybody ends up having a boss. My bosses are my team and my staff and my clients. I work harder as an entrepreneur than I ever did when I was employed. The other myth is that it's easy. You've mentioned that, George. It is not easy. It can be very lonely. It can be a struggle. I think entrepreneurship is a business that is actually a personal growth engine that's just camouflaged or disguised as a business. Because the things you will learn about yourself from running a business are like nothing else. And I think the biggest myth for me, if I can bring it back home, especially to Africa, and specifically, I mean, our business is in Uganda, it's in Nigeria, it's in Kenya, it's in Rwanda, and it's in South Africa, which is where I am based right now. And I think the biggest myth for me on this side of the planet is that entrepreneurship for us is a luxury. George, it's not. For me, it wasn't. It was a necessity. If I didn't get into running my own business, into creating value and being paid more than I was getting at my job, I would not have an education. My sister would not have an education. My brother would not have an education. So I know that sometimes it feels like entrepreneurship is a luxury, but for many of us, in my experience, is that it is just sheer necessity. It's the need to survive.
Incredible. And, so that, again, that perspective is the critical piece to it all, is having an understanding that it's not just a luxury to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the only way.
Yeah.
And again, having the tools of a program like 10,000 Women is of critical importance, because better than anyone, Shanice, you have to know finance.
Yes.
You have to understand the supply chain. If you have a supply chain type business, you have to understand who your partners, who will your vendors be? How do you select a vendor? Oh, and by the way, the best part, hiring.
Yes.
HR. You have to be the HR manager. You have to be the marketing manager. You have to be the finance manager, and all of the rest. And if you don't have the tools in place, gosh, it's going to take a lot longer to figure that out. And that's the whole point of this, is that you're being armed and equipped to be able to scale anything, any business. And now you're in a position to help so many other women-owned businesses and businesses in general.
That's it. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yes.
Shanice, what is the best piece of business advice you have ever received and that you can share today with our global audience?
Wow, I've received a lot of really good business advice. I'm an avid reader, so I think that at any one point, I've been inside the minds of great people. I mean, that's the one way to do it, right, is to read. But I think the most amazing piece of advice I've ever been given actually came from Goldman Sachs. I had the absolute privilege of traveling to New York, and I was surrounded by all these people. And to be honest, I was dumbfounded. I was like, how will I even speak in front of these amazing people that I've only ever read or heard about? And a gentleman stood up and said, never listen to advice. And I was a bit taken aback. I was like, huh? And I think that played into an ethos that I've always had, which is I cannot advise anybody because I am not them. They will never, their situations can be similar to mine in so many ways, but they'll never be identical. So I think that, ironically, I'm going to say never give advice, and I'm going to give advice. I can hear that in my head right now. But I think it's that if you discover who you are, what you're good at, and your purpose in the world, you'll always be valuable. And this is, I think, how to run good business as well, is to truly understand yourself. Because when you understand yourself, you understand the value you bring to the world and the thing that you do so well that nobody can do better than you. And I think this is what brings joy. This is what keeps us resilient. As an entrepreneur, you're going to hit so many roadblocks. If you don't at some point have an intersection between loving what you do and being able to really create tangible value, you will burn out so quickly. And I know I mentioned necessity, but necessity comes with actually identifying that unique thing that you can offer the world that nobody else can. And that's when you'll be able to actually create value that even outlasts you. So that's the advice. It's really dig deep and figure out who you are.
Again, at a loss for words, but I'll try. I'll try. You just defined, so many things like purpose, and passion. You cannot be an entrepreneur without passion. But passion will only get you so far if you don't have the tools necessary to drive forward, to understand how you can accelerate growth, how to hire. Where do you begin to hire people? Where do you find these people? How do you find the right skill sets? How do you even build the skill sets necessary for that specific business? Oh, and by the way, again, how do you find the key partners that you'll need to make it happen? And so, but what you see in your business, Shanice, is your passion. And that combined with the process that was provided by Goldman Sachs and the advice that you've given. Look, I always say, we have a conversation, my wife and I, about they. We all know they say you should do this, or they say you should do that. And you always have to wonder, who are they?
They.
who is the they? Let's not mistake the process, a process for successfully running a business, with the fact that believing in what you can do is also critically important. So when you marry those two things, it's limitless what you can achieve, right? That passion, purpose, and then understanding the process. So I am just, you just define that passion and purpose piece that's so just incredibly important for everyone. Thank you. Charlotte, in developing countries, 70% of female-led small and medium-sized businesses cannot acquire adequate funding. I have a tough time reading that. It's a tough time reading that and understanding that. In many cases, any funding at all. They can't find any funding at all. How can we change that, and how might the 10,000 Women program help to tackle this global issue?
Great question, and I noticed Shanice doing a lot of nodding when you said that. So maybe worth also getting Shanice's experiences as well. But that's exactly what we found, and through our own experience, through a huge amount of research, the women were coming to us saying that they needed help with access to capital to be able to grow their businesses and get to the next stage. So that's why we launched the partnership that I mentioned at the outset with the IFC and the World Bank to create the first ever gender-specific financing opportunity, our Women's Entrepreneurship Opportunity Facility. And that's designed to do exactly that, to help women access the finance that they need to grow their businesses. And look, there are two parts to this. One, we've already talked about it at length. It's giving women the tools, the knowledge, the skills, and the confidence that they have to build their financial forecasts, to understand their cash flow, to build a funding case, to project into the future what they need for their businesses to grow, and to be able to do all of that. And also to have the confidence that they can go to their local bank, present that business case, often if it is something and bearing in mind that in many societies that can be difficult. And therefore the other part of that has us been working through the IFC with many local banks around the world to skill them up and to educate them and to help them lend on to female entrepreneurs. So through that process to date, we've mobilized over $1.76 billion to female entrepreneurs across emerging markets around the world, helping over 72,000 women-led businesses. So those are results that we're very, very proud of, but obviously still a long way to go and even more work to be done, particularly as we come out of our COVID pandemic.
And what an incredible opportunity to applaud that work and that leadership, because it does, start with leadership and a focus. And focusing on this issue of funding is also critically important. So now you have the idea, you have the passion, you have the process, but you have no funding.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So all of these things are critically important. And I'll go back to the fact that, again, none of that is easy. Nothing is easy. But the fact that companies like Goldman Sachs are stepping up and saying, hey, this is important. This is something we need to focus on. And just recently with, opening up 10,000 women online to anyone. I mean, that's what it takes. Now, anyone on the planet can take the course, right? And have the fundamental skills necessary to get to that next step and understanding, okay, here's why finance is important, or here's the finance process. And here's where I should go to begin requesting funding, to begin, living out this dream of entrepreneurship. So I think that's all critical. Shanice, can I ask you a question? And that is basically, if we were, just imagine reading an article 10 years from now, a news article.
Right.
What would you like it to say about women entrepreneurs?
Wow. I'd like the headline to say 80% of flourishing businesses managed by women. I'd like it to delve into the fact that women don't feel the need to ask for permission to be involved in conversations of finance. I don't know a better finance manager than a woman who runs a household. Do you know how far we can stretch a dollar, right? When it comes to planning, to management, a lot of the skills that are absolutely crucial in business are a beautiful harmony between men and women. So that headline obviously is ambitious of me, and it's just saying, you know what, I would like to see that we are living in a harmonious society where men and women are equal contributors. Difference is important, but equal, right? So I'm not saying that we're the same. We have complementary skills. And I think that would be amazing if I could see women in science, in STEM, coding. I live in my digital business. Over 60 to 70% of the young people who are coders and who are involved in coding are men. And I want to change that. I want to have more women, but it starts at a very young age. It starts with education and all these things. So if that article could just see consistently that the strides made for women are across the board, whether it comes to education, believing in ourselves, the kind of jobs that we want to do, and the kind of, I guess, societal acceptance for the things that we want to do over and above raising a family, which is also very noble and very, perfect. That's what I would like it to say, that there is no ceiling anymore. We shouldn't even be talking about a ceiling for women to shatter. That should be a thing of the past. That would be amazing.
Well, that's an incredible way to conclude what is just a profound interview with both of you. What an incredible series of insights that really take your breath away on so many different levels. To have Charlotte Keenan, global head of 10,000 Women, along with an incredible leader, Shanice Leggetti, Group CEO of Blue Flamingo in Africa, is just is profound. You've been through the program, you've seen the impact, you keep your passion intact, You're still a passionate entrepreneur, but now you have all of the tools in the toolkit, literally, necessary to help continue and grow your businesses despite the global situation. And for that, we're grateful, and I know our global audience is grateful, and will take away, without a doubt, so many different lessons. I want to thank both of you for the incredible insights and inspiration. What an awesome interview. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having
Thank you.
me. Thank you. And thank you to Goldman Sachs.
I echo that.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Goldman Sachs, and thank you, Blue Flamingo. And we want to see it all over the planet and every country. Let's make that happen. And by the way, let's help achieve the global goals by 2030. We laid out
Yes.
this vision. Let's have that vision be we achieve the global goals in 2030. And like you
Yep.
said, there is no glass ceiling. Men and women are running businesses in an equal way and for equal impact. And there are no barriers. What a goal that is. Thank you so very much.
Exactly. Thank you.
George,
you.
thank you, Charlotte.
So excited to have with us today Christina Shapiro, President of the Impact Fund for Children at UNICEF USA. Christina, welcome.
Thank you, George. It's great to be with you today.
So great to have you here today, especially during this time, Christina, to talk a little bit about the work you're doing and about you and your career. And so I'd like to start by asking you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well as your professional journey?
Sure. I think you and I had the chance to meet in the past, and you told me you were also born and raised abroad. I was born and raised in Mexico City. And while I was lucky enough to have access to all of the educational and health-related services that I needed, I knew early on that I wanted to focus on ways to curb the inequity that I saw every day around me. So in terms of my professional journey, George, I used the first few years out of college to acquire key business skills in consulting and modeling, financial modeling, I should say, and marketing. And then chose grad school as a way to pivot into what I consider the impact phase of my career. And I went to SEPA, and then after SEPA went to work for the City of New York, and then after the City of New York to Goldman Sachs. But the thread through the last 17 years, both in the public and private sector, were that I focused on helping underserved small businesses get access to the services, staff, business education, and financing they needed to scale their enterprises. And the reason that was so rewarding to me is that I was able to evidence the resilience and the creativity and the impact that small business owners have, not only on their families, but on their communities more broadly. And so that journey took me from private to public and now to nonprofit. And I feel privileged that I've had the chance to work across all of these sectors, because each and every one of those sectors are critical to helping solve the economic, environmental, and social challenges that we have ahead of us.
Well, what's incredible about that, I mean, I love everything you said, but what's incredible about that is the cross-sector nature of what you just described as your career journey. And I think that everyone should have that opportunity. Everyone should have the perspective at the minimum to understand the importance of this cross-sector collaboration. And in your case, you've had a front row seat to that, which is why we're so excited to be talking to you today about your recent appointment as the new president of the Impact Fund for Children and the Bridge Fund as well at UNICEF USA. Congratulations.
Thank you. Wow, hearing you say that, I get all excited all over again.
Yeah.
It's officially 2 months on the job today.
Today. Well, happy work anniversary. I mean, that's incredible. Today. I mean,
thank you.
We love anniversaries, we love birthdays, we love timelines. And so what made you decide that this position, I think I heard a little bit of that in your intro, but what made you decide that this specific position was the right fit for you, as well as that next step in your absolutely incredible journey?
Thank you, George. So let me first tell you, the Impact Fund for Children is the impact investing affiliate of UNICEF USA, and UNICEF USA is the key advocacy, engagement, and fundraising partner for UNICEF in the United States. So just that way you and your audience know what the Impact Fund for Children is. And there are really three key reasons for why this was the right next step for me. One, I wanted to be part of an organization where impact was at the core of everything. So it was undisputable that we were focused on impact. And it was also, I wanted to be part of an organization where the target of our impact was unquestionably clear. There are a lot of organizations that focus on impact, but the focus of their impact is maybe very fragmented. And I like the idea of an organization that focuses every single day on helping to make the lives of children, vulnerable children around the world, better. The second main reason is that I was ready for a leadership role where I would be able to raise, manage, and deploy money. And in other words, use finance for good. I've had roles that leverage finance and others that don't, and I wanted to keep leveraging finance and doing it for a core focus on impact. And the last reason is that, in my perspective, is that investing in children has the best return on investment. Preventing health issues, helping children access education, and keeping them safe enables them to thrive and become key contributing members to their economy, helping drive GDP. I don't think there is a better investment we can make.
Well, and I have to agree with you, and you know that. I think that's the most impactful, most powerful investment you can make is absolutely in children. And so given the current situation, this global pandemic, unprecedented, how are you and your colleagues utilizing innovation and technology to help keep business as usual on some level?
Absolutely. Well, I'll focus later on some of the innovative projects that we're doing from a project finance perspective. But with regards to our organization, UNICEF USA is working entirely remotely via Zoom, and huge kudos to my colleagues in IT who immediately set up the entire organization of over 300 people in UNICEF USA to work remotely so we could continue with our efforts. The other thing I'll share is that due to the pandemic, like a lot of other organizations, yourselves included, George, a lot of our galas and typical fundraising events were canceled. However, our incredible special events team put together 2 virtual events in May. One was bringing together our regional leadership team. Over 110 people from our regional boards were able to join on a Zoom call to hear from Executive Director Henrietta Fore, but also to talk amongst themselves how we could address the urgent needs of children around the world in response to COVID. The other really exciting event was that UNICEF USA hosted its first streaming event, UNICEF Won't Stop. And I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but it was an incredible production where iconic musicians and UNICEF ambassadors guided audiences on a journey to 11 countries, highlighting UNICEF's COVID-19 response, elevating frontline workers, health experts, and children that UNICEF serves. And during the event, I don't know if you are an ABBA fan, but Cher debuted her single Chiquitita with all of the royalties to benefit UNICEF's work. And 2 highlights from that event, which I think are really exciting for the team that produced it. One is that it's estimated that portions of that video were seen by over 5 million people, not just in the US, but abroad. And from a fundraising standpoint, UNICEF USA was able to capture a lot of new donors. 72% of the donations came from donors that hadn't previously donated to UNICEF USA.
Incredible.
So I think that was incredibly successful.
Well, it is incredibly successful, and I did see pieces of it, and I thought it was incredibly inspiring and very well done, and especially a way to continue the eternal focus on the incredible work that you're doing at UNICEF, and obviously with all the work you're doing directly, including what we recently saw in the news, which is the Bridge Fund accelerated $10 million to scale up the distribution of PPE supplies, personal protective equipment. Can you explain to the global audience today about this acceleration and where some of these supplies are heading?
Absolutely. So let me first provide some context again, so before I talk about the transaction. The UNICEF USA Bridge Fund is the core impact investing tool of the Impact Fund. You know, you asked me a question before. The Impact Fund is the affiliate. It's almost like the parent company. And the Bridge Fund is the core impact product that the Impact Fund has had for the last 9 years. And the reason the Bridge Fund exists is that it addresses the timing gaps that emerge between when a donor makes a commitment to UNICEF and when the UNICEF actually receives that cash. So we aim to bridge that timing gap. And since 2011, we have been able to pre-finance over $340 million, helping nearly 1 billion children around the world. So most of the bridge funding that we've done has supported the purchase of vaccines and health supplies historically. It has also pre-financed the purchase and distribution of nutrition commodities and other UNICEF programs. But very importantly, we also have been able to respond in situations that, like emergencies like COVID-19. Mm-hmm. And so what you just mentioned is the fact that we were able to provide $10 million of bridge financing capacity for the UNICEF supply division to purchase PPE on behalf of governments that are waiting for funding from multilaterals like the World Bank or others, so that healthcare workers can safely treat those with COVID-19. So that's it in a nutshell. And what I would say is that you can understand, George, that in this pandemic in particular, every day matters. And our funds allow UNICEF to accelerate supply purchases, often by months.
Incredible.
So I think that tells you what it is. I want to answer your second question, which is where the supply is heading. And so, for example, the 10 million that we were able to provide has already been deployed to help several countries in Africa and in Central Asia to accelerate the availability of supplies. And the way that it works is that we provide the 10 million, they send it out to buy supplies on behalf of governments. As the World Bank funding or multilateral funding comes in, UNICEF can redeploy those 10 million multiple times so that they can keep purchasing supplies. So it functions almost like a revolving fund. They keep that 10 million on a revolving basis and then don't send it back to us until the end of the year so that we're able to help them achieve greater impact.
You're describing such incredible impact, and I can see why you're so excited. Just 2 months in. I mean, it's hard to believe you've just been doing it. I mean, the way you're talking about it, it's as if this is the culmination of years of planning, and just I'm in awe. I'm awestruck by the work that you're doing. Can you tell us maybe a bit about some other projects, some big projects, because there are always big projects in the world you're working in?
Yes, there are.
At UNICEF that you're really excited and obviously passionate about.
Yeah. Well, big kudos to the team. As I told you, I've only been there for 2 months. So a lot of what we're able to do is a result of the incredible team that is still there or that came before me that was able to set this up. So I won't take any credit for any of this work. So things that I'm excited about are our ability to remain nimble, in particular in times of crisis, George, where you just have to be able to respond quickly. And in the context of COVID, UNICEF has been working and continues to work with governments, partners, and businesses to provide access to life-saving supplies, including PPE, which we talked about. So I'm really honored to be part of this organization, because last week, UNICEF USA, in partnership with the Impact Fund for Children and the UNICEF Supply Division, announced a new financial tool called the FAST Fund for UNICEF. This is in addition and separate from the Bridge Fund. And the FAST Fund is meant to help accelerate the supply of PPE by providing financial guarantees for UNICEF Supply Division to procure essential goods. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about how it works, because it is different than the Bridge Fund. The FAST Fund will provide guarantees to protect UNICEF's prepayment of supplies until goods are delivered. This is important because some suppliers now are asking for about 1/3 of the total cost up front, which would increase the risk for UNICEF. So we provide the guarantee, and after the delivery of the goods, which typically takes between 30 and 60 days, the guarantee is released and can be used to guarantee another transaction, and so on and so forth until the fund's term ends, which we expect will be at least a year. And at this point, we're looking to raise $3 million at a minimum from individual donors, foundations, corporations, donor-advised funds in the form of either grants or recoverable grants. So think about this. If you're an impact investor that wants to make a very impactful investment and have the possibility of recouping your principal back at the end of 18 months, the FAST Fund recoverable grant is an excellent opportunity for you. And in terms of impact, this really grounded it for me. UNICEF USA estimates that for each $100,000 investment, which can be recycled about 6 times in 1 year, we're able to secure up to $1.8 million in supplies, which can benefit up to 12,000 healthcare workers. So, yeah, so we're calling impact investors forward because we think they can have a huge role in this crisis, and also obviously in helping us address the broader SDGs. So that's what I'm excited about.
Well, and as you should be, because it's just profound and so incredibly rewarding to even just hear this type of work being done and led by folks like yourself and your team and all the folks that come around these projects. And now knowing that you are in a position of leadership within this organization is just so rewarding for me personally and professionally, because I understand the empathy and the pathos and all these other words that I could come up with that you include in your work. And so just a few short months ago, it was, January, and wow, we were looking at 3,500 odd some days to achieve those 17 broad goals of the United Nations. And we were sitting there saying, well, here's the timeline. We have a 10-year span. Here's all the work that organizations like, UNICEF are doing. Here's, this global work being done. And a few months later, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. And so what do you think, Christina, will play a key factor in helping to achieve these global goals by 2030?
Now there's no easy answer, George, but what I will say is, and you know this better than anyone, is that none of these goals can be achieved alone, right? So you need partnerships, creative solutions, and constant innovation, willingness to fail in order to succeed, right? I mean, we need to keep trying new and different things. As I said, I think impact investing and crowding in private sector funds is part of the solution, and those private sector funds can do things sometimes that government or philanthropy can't do, and certainly can't do alone. What I will say is that I am concerned because COVID is threatening to undo decades of progress, impacting immunization rates, child poverty, and child mortality. And I read the statistic that at least 80 million children under the age of 1 are at risk of diseases such as diphtheria, measles, and polio as COVID is disrupting the vaccination efforts. And that is a huge concern. And, I agree with Greta Thunberg, who noted that COVID-19 is a crisis, is a child's rights crisis. And we need to make sure that we take collective action so that children are not falling victim to the secondary impacts of the pandemic, whether that's lack of immunization, loss of schooling, or increase in risks. So I wish I had a better answer, but those are the concerns I have. And I do think the private sector plays a key role as well.
Absolutely, 100%. And so the Bridge Fund's committed to using the SDGs as a framework for some of the work being done. Can you tell our global audience today what goals you specifically target and how is your progress going?
Sure. So, I'm still relatively new at this and learning, as I said, but the Bridge Fund targets multiple SDGs in support of UNICEF's work. And so certainly we've targeted SDG 2, which is about zero hunger, 3, which is about health and well-being, 4, focused on quality education, 6, which is around clean water and sanitation, 10, around reducing inequalities, and 17. But I will say, in particular, the work that the Bridge Fund does or has done to this date particularly aligns around SDG 3. So if you look at our fiscal year 19 quarterly report for the Bridge Fund, the majority of our funding went to support health initiatives, particularly for vaccines against polio and measles, where we were able to help procure, just in that 1 year, 207 million vaccines on schedule. So that's one example, but much more needs to be done.
Incredible. And so at UNICEF and the work that you're doing, you're a few months in, how are you seeing the organization and your work helping to foster innovation?
Yeah, I'm really excited about what I'm seeing. I mean, I know that from when I read and decided to take this job, UNICEF has a 70-year history of innovating for children, and they do it through the programs they deliver in over 190 countries, and they have an Office of Innovation. But I was able to read about some examples that really captured my imagination, and I'm going to share 3. So the first one is, imagine schools being made out of recycled plastic bricks in Cote d'Ivoire. So UNICEF has partnered with a really cool company called Conceptos Plásticos that takes recycled plastic waste, and then mostly employs women to pick up that waste, and then converts that waste into plastic bricks, which are proven to be more cost-effective and resilient, and are using those bricks to build schools. So I just think that's a really innovative, like triple bottom line innovation. The second one I read about, and again, need to learn more about, but really captured my imagination, is that vaccines are being delivered via drone in the remote Pacific island of Vanuatu. So imagine being able to deliver those vaccines. I don't even know how they do it, given all of the requirements around cold storage for vaccines, but they're doing it. The third example is how UNICEF's supply division, which is a core partner of ours, is using its procurement power to incentivize business to create products that UNICEF needs. So what they do is they publish these target product profiles, which functions as a guide to the private sector to develop products that meet UNICEF's needs. And one example is they were focused on creating a device to help fight pneumonia, because I didn't know this until I joined UNICEF, but pneumonia is the biggest killer of children under the age of 5. And so UNICEF created the Acute Respiratory Infection Diagnostic Aid Project. I had to look that up because it is a mouthful. So UNICEF's ARIDA project focused on creating a product to automate the counting of breaths when trying to diagnose if a child has pneumonia. And so UNICEF worked with 2 partners, Philips and Massimo, and they developed and field trialed devices to replace a manual count of breaths, which was less accurate. And when I asked them, well, what has been the impact of this innovation? They were able to tell me that as a result of this project, close to 1.3 million children were able to access antibiotic treatment. Over 300,000 children benefited from improved care, and over 6,000 health workers were trained and equipped to use the new tools. So I just think that's incredible. I'm in awe of how they're using their power, their market power, to drive innovation.
Well, I'm just speechless by all of those examples.
Yeah.
I mean, those aren't, your common every day, well, here's what we're doing. That's just changing the world examples. Yeah, it's cool, and it's changing the world. And wow, I can see your excitement as to why, this role is so perfect for you, and why you're so excited to be celebrating today again your work birthday at 2 months in, to see that excitement still there and only growing. And so we're at our final question in this incredibly insightful interview, and I'd like to ask you, Christina, what are your 3 key insights that you can share with our global audience that's helped you throughout your successful career?
I don't know. I feel like I should be getting advice rather than giving advice, George. So feel free to share it with me afterwards. But I'll share 3 things that I think have helped me in my career, and that I certainly share with my children. So I don't know. Hopefully they're relevant for somebody out there. But I would say that the first insight for me is that in change there is opportunity, and so I would encourage anyone who is considering how to grow their career to look for change, be comfortable with change, and learn how to thrive in it. And I think some people shy away from it, but we're in a world today where things are changing too fast. Even if you stay within the same company, even if you stay within the same role. I mean, think about how we had to adapt, and people in their existing roles had to adapt in the context of COVID. So embrace change. The second insight for me is don't make perfect the enemy of good. And I wish I had known that earlier in my career. I think earlier on, I felt like I had to be perfect at something before I had a chance to raise my hand and say, hey, I have something to say. And my encouragement to others is, sometimes you need to learn and be willing to learn and listen, but don't make perfect the enemy of good. And the last one, which I really do try and impart to my children, is that we each have a responsibility to achieve impact on what I say is a one-to-one, but also a one-to-many basis. And what I mean by that is that each act matters. What I do to make any single person's life better is important. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, in particular, when we're looking at some of these challenges that seem so overwhelming. But simultaneously, we have a responsibility to think about how each one of us can create a greater impact at scale. And that's regardless of whether you're working in the private sector, leading a small business or a large corporation, whether you're working for government and in charge of policy or managing contracts that touch thousands or millions of people, or whether you're in a nonprofit implementing a program either locally or internationally. So with that, over back to you, George, and welcome to hear any advice you have.
Oh my gosh, I'm not often speechless. I've been saying that a lot lately, but you've left me in an incredibly inspired place after this interview today. And I know for all of our global audience today, it's going to be a lessons learned opportunity from your key insights. Christina Shapiro, president of the Impact Fund for Children at UNICEF USA. Today, on your 2-month anniversary as president, I want to thank you for all of these incredible insights. Thank you for all of the work you're doing and will do. I can't wait to see, and I urge all of our global audience to watch and learn from the leadership that you're bringing to the work at UNICEF USA as president of the Impact Fund for Children. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, George. Bye-bye.
What an incredible second day of the annual Global Innovation 2030 Digital Summit. And what an incredible conversation with Christina Shapiro, president of the Children's Impact Fund at UNICEF USA. We'll have a brief intermission, and coming up next, an incredible interview with Richard Haas, president of the Council on Foreign Relations at 1:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Stay tuned, and we'll see you soon.